The informational meeting will begin in 1 minute.
Meeting to order and welcome to the November 7th land use, or not land use, that's going to be shortly here, but anyway, to our informational meeting. Okay, there we go. I had pushed the button, but it didn't work. But anyway, welcome. It seems like it's been quite a while since we've been together, so it's kind of nice to get back into action. So we'll go ahead and get started. With now our Land Use Committee report from Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for putting that in your head right away. Yes, we met and we had a presentation by Matt Tobias on the parking strip ordinance. He explained that this is the second season of the ordinance and enforcement of it won't begin until the spring of 2018. We talked about that for quite a bit. That was pretty much the general topic of most of the meeting. We then had some discussion afterward regarding helping a couple who've had rocks in their boulevard. We did thank staff for their work on the ordinance and education being the focus of the year of that ordinance. So it wasn't a real long meeting, but we learned a lot, and I believe that's pretty much the summary of it. Thanks.
Any questions for Councilor Selberg? Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilor. Okay, the next item on the agenda is City Council open discussion. Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Most of you should have, well, all of the council should have received an email that I just want to draw to your attention and just make a comment about it publicly as additional invites will be going out later today. As many of you have heard me talk about TIF or tax increment financing, I've been in contact with the chamber as well as the state to talk about a TIF forum and educational opportunity for all elected officials from the school board, county commission, city council, legislators, as well as those that are invested in our community from development and those in city government. So invites are going out. Lieutenant Governor Matt Michaels, Secretary of Department of Revenue Andy Gerlach, and Department of Revenue's Director of Property Special Taxes Mike Howdyshell and myself will lead this forum. It is open to the public. It will be publicly noticed. We do have a RSVP on there as the room only holds about 45. They have agreed to come back and do it again if there is a good turnout for it. And they will be traveling throughout the state as there are some changes coming forward for TIFs this year in session. And so it's a good opportunity to learn what those changes are, as well as educate ourselves on the use of TIF. So just wanted to update you on that. It's Monday, November 13th from 3 to 5.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you. I do have a couple of updates. I did the Bishop Dudley sleep out on October 19th into the 20th. It slept in a cardboard box outside. It was a little cool, but it wasn't near as cool as it could have been. So we got a little bit of a sense of what it's like, and coming out of it, really the word was gratitude for me, which is gratitude about a lot of the simple things that we take for granted every day. The next thing was I took a Lyft ride last week. It was a very good experience from beginning to end. It was a good learning experience, and it was top-notch from beginning to end, and I really enjoyed it. Next week, I'm going to be able to take Lyft a lot more because I'm having a major engine overhaul, so I'll be out of a car for a week. So I will be lifting back and forth, and I'll probably do a taxi and a few other things to kind of comparison shop and kind of get a feel for all of them. The last thing, I had the opportunity to spend time with a contractor, and I also spent time sitting down with an architect with the building plans for the event center, and I also got to go out and touch and feel the actual panels that we have on the building. They're big, they're heavy, and it was really impressive to see how they go together. I really learned a lot. It kind of exploded a lot of sort of notions that I had, and to have them kind of walk me through it, how they work, and also to find out there's been a lot of discussion about, you know, are we going to have the problem that the Viking Stadium has with the panels falling off? And it turns out that the Viking Stadium has a zinc panel, which is a very soft metal, and the connector is different. And so it's apples and oranges. We have a very heavy metal panel. It's connected very securely. So, you know, absent a natural disaster, those panels ought to be on there for decades, and they're not going anywhere. So it is apples and oranges with that particular comparison, even though they were, you know, the same contractor built it. It's a completely different material. But to see how they go together and how they seal and how it's supposed to work, it was very, very informative, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Okay, Councilor Selbert.
Thank you. Yeah, kudos to Councilor Neitzert on your Bishop Dudley sleep out. I particularly enjoyed your article that you wrote on that. Thought that was very good. And on that particular subject, I have had the privilege of serving on the Homeless Advisory Board, and November is Hunger and Homeless Awareness Month. I believe that we will be recognizing them this evening at the meeting. This year they are asking you to focus on and maybe get involved in what's called the Pick Six program. And what that is there's a number of events going on this month that you can take part in, and they're hoping that you might just take part in 6. You can go to the website, if you do not have it, to look the calendar up. It's www.housingforthehomeless.org, and they're giving you some events such as, if you're at the meeting tonight, you can check one of your Pick 6 off because you've attended the proclamation. If you wear green tomorrow in support of unaccompanied youth, there's another annual homeless memorial celebration next week, a walk a mile event. There's just a lot of fun things that you can take. Riding the bus one day to a number of your events is another one. So I would encourage you to take part, check out the calendar, and keep Hunger and Homeless Awareness Month in your mind as November moves along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Any other items for open discussion? Yes, Councilor Starr.
Thank you. 2 things that I wanted to throw out. I wanted to thank the Sioux Falls Development Foundation and Slater Bar for hosting. Most of the council, I think, had a chance to take a look at Foundation Park and see progress of where we're at and how we're moving forward in that development. There's some dirt been moved. I think the interesting part for most of us is Mr. Barr told us multiple times that there was a lot of dirt work to be done and threw out numbers, but it didn't really make sense until Councilor Neitzert said, "You mean that light pole over there that used to be where the dirt level was?" And it really brought it home of how much work it's taken to prepare the ground for future development. So again, thank you to the Development Foundation. The other thing that I wanted to mention today is that I was invited by Principal Zeke over at Annie Sullivan Elementary. Annie Sullivan and 2 other elementary schools in Sioux Falls have been designated as code immersion programs. And they're starting the young folks out teaching them JavaScript and some Minecraft. And we had a chance to tour from kindergarten through 5th grade and watch the programming that's being done and the code that's being written by kindergartners that, you know, I thought I'd make it to 3rd or 4th grade before I got totally lost in what they were doing, but the kindergartners kind of put me in my place this morning. So it was fun to get to see that and to see a really cutting-edge program. There were also superintendents. There were several people from the Sioux Falls School District, but then there were also superintendents from surrounding schools as well as the Department of Education. So we're really doing the school district's doing some great things with kids and giving them marketable skills, but actually instead of instituting another discipline program, they're actually coming up with programs that kids get involved with and get a part of their education, and will be able to work through and have marketable skills that we have a real need both in our community and as a nation. So thank you to the Sioux Falls School District for inviting me to be part of that today.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other Comments for open discussion? I'll just add very briefly. It's been so long since we've been together. I did participate in Read Across America a few weeks back, and that was extremely fun, reading the different sections of kindergartners at Cleveland Elementary School, sitting in the very classrooms that my children sat in many years ago. So it took me back to that, and it was just enjoyable event. And our head librarian has stated that we set a record, at least for Sioux Falls. So we'll have to see how we do that, because they read the same book across the country. And I know that they have set records for successive years, and I think it was over 2.3 million children were read to the previous year. So anyway, it was a very rewarding experience. Okay, so no further discussion? Sure, go ahead, Councilor Rolfing.
I was able to participate in with the police, their EVAC driving school. This would have been about 3 weeks ago, and just had, number one, had a blast. The rush of adrenaline was unbelievable. Going through, out on the parking lot of the fairgrounds, going through a maze, if you will, and just doing it as fast as you possibly can with those vehicles, and simulating a chase. They even put me in through a couple of situations where I had a paint gun on my side, and did get one in my arm and my stomach, but I got him 3 times. So it was. I would encourage some of you to do that if you're inclined. It is a wonderful experience. That was one of the things on my bucket list that I wanted to check off, and I got it done. So thank you to Chief Burns and the people that helped me get through that. And it's unbelievable what these policemen have to go through in the situations. Just to give you an idea, I drove to do a traffic stop on a routine traffic stop with somebody. They made a mistake, and so I pulled them over, and as I'm walking up, there was a gun laid on the dashboard. Okay, what do? I've never had any training or anything like that, but they walked me through it, and well, not walked me through it. They let me do it and gave me a few instructions, and then instructed me what I did wrong and right. So the adrenaline, I mean, what these people have, the decisions that these police officers have to make, split second, not even, we don't have 1 second. You got a split second to save your life. And so the training is very, very well done, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do it.
Thank you for sharing, Councilor Rolfing. Very important to hear that, because those scenarios are happening everywhere across the country as we speak now. So that training is vitally important. So thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to our presentations. And the first presentation is Cable TV and OVS Fee Audit Report. And Kim Schroeder, our internal auditor, will be presenting. Kim, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This audit was an audit of the franchise fee and OVS license fee revenue received by the city. We currently have 2 agreements that exist with both Midco and Vast Broadband. The agreement with Midco is a 10-year franchise agreement that will expire in December of 2019. And the agreement with Vast is an OVS license agreement originally entered into between the city and Nelegy that has went through several acquisitions, but is also in its last renewal period and will end December of 2019 as well. The city does collect approximately $1 million in revenue from these agreements annually. The fees are self-reported and remitted to the city on a monthly basis. Monthly remittals are being reviewed by multimedia services staff for reasonableness, and any unanticipated fluctuations are researched. But the last audit of the cable franchise and OVS fee revenue was performed in 2009. The objectives of the current audit were to determine if the cable television fees and OVS license fees were properly calculated and paid on time, to ensure compliance with various insurance requirements of the agreements, and to determine if the city has established and sufficiently defined roles and responsibilities to administer the agreements. The audit period for this was for the years of 2014 through 2016. During that period, we selected 6 months of fee remittances and traced those amounts paid to the city back to the detailed support schedules. We found that the fees were properly supported and remitted timely. We also tested individual customer invoices and recalculated the franchise fee for those customers during those same 6 months. We found the franchise fees and the OVS fees were properly calculated with one exception, or the following exception. MIDCO identified a period starting in January of 2011 through May of 2015 when their franchise fee was calculated at 2% instead of 2.5% on one particular line item of the customer statements, which was the local broadcast retransmission fee. That was a fee that they began passing through to their customers in 2011 that gives the cable providers consent to retransmit their signal to the customers. So basically what happened here is when MIDCO updated their rate schedules to include this retransmission fee, they incorrectly set the rate on the back end to 2% and not the full 2.5% because of the local portion that's passed through to the schools was omitted on that. The miscalculation was not discovered by them initially. They do an annual rate review, and they do test some of these fees to the customers. The initial fees were so low that they were approximately ½ cent per customer, so it was assumed to be a rounding issue. As that retransmission fee increased over the years, so did that variance. And when it became 2 to 3 cents per customer, it was caught in their review and corrected. We do have a table in the report that shows the estimated uncollected franchise fees. I think that's on page 4. And then we did break that into 2 sections because city ordinance does define the limitation of recovery as 3 years. So we've broken that into the amount to be recovered of $12,046 and the amount that we won't recover of $13,717. We did make the following recommendations as results of our work. We recommend MIDCO remit the amount of uncollected franchise fees within the recovery period. Again, that amount was $12,046.48, and those have been paid to the city as of last month. We also did review insurance coverages for both providers, noting that the city has proper documentation on file and proper coverage levels are in place. And a review of contract monitoring basically showed us the city doesn't currently have a centralized process. Monitoring is done at each department level because of the uniqueness of the agreements. The franchise and OVS agreements are managed by multimedia support with the assistance of the city's finance, legal, and internal audit departments. The recommendation in our audit report is that we recommend management and internal audit develop a plan for routine review of revenue received from the cable TV and OVS franchise agreements. And I have had the opportunity to work with Sue and Brett on that. And if I can get myself together, sorry. They're going to add to their monthly review and do a little bit of trend analysis that's going to look at the change in revenue from the prior month and also change in, we're going to start having the franchisees submit total customers, cable customers on their remittal so that they can look at total customers as a % of possible customer base and implement that into their trend analysis. And then each year when the franchisees do a rate change notification to the city, multimedia and finance will work together and do some similar recalculations of customer bills like what we did in the audit so that we can identify these a little bit quicker. And with that, I would open it up to any questions you might have.
Questions for our audit manager?
I have a comment.
Yes, Councilor Ralphie.
Thank you, Kim, for this. Is exactly what we have you for, and what we do this. I just wanted to point out that on page 5, where her comments says the city does not have a centralized process for monitoring compliance with contracts. I don't know how many contracts we've got out there, but I bet there's hundreds. And we cannot expect our department heads number one, or people there, and or the audit department of 3 people to have those, look at those for compliance on an annual or a biannual or whatever basis as we come along. So I think it's something that we as the audit committee need to take a look at and to make a recommendation maybe to the administration and through the council of how we can do this. Again, we're not looking for more work for anybody or whatever, but we do need to, in the future, find a way to monitor compliance on all these contracts, because some of the department heads and the departments just don't have time to do that. I don't know if Tracy would agree with me on that. I'm sure we will bring him in and talk about that, but anytime we can get more monitoring on those kind of things or set up systems to do that, it will be better for the city and for the taxpayer in the long run. So just an idea, just to let you know that that's some of the things that Kim and I are thinking about.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Any other questions for Kim? Thank you, Kim. Okay, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, accounts payable audit, and that report is going to be given by our internal auditor, Ashley Vandenberg. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. I am Ashley Vandenberg, City Internal Auditor. Our department completed an audit of the city's accounts payable process. This report was presented to and accepted by the Audit Committee on October 11th. The audit focused on the areas of vendor management, invoice handling, and the reconciliation process. The 4 objectives of the audit were to determine if adequate controls exist over the process of vendor setup, maintenance, and validation, to determine if adequate controls are in place to ensure payments are mathematically accurate, properly supported, authorized, and remitted timely, to determine if adequate controls are in place to prevent duplicate payments, and to determine if an accurate and timely reconciliation is prepared between the accounts payable bank account and the general ledger. To perform this audit, we interviewed the accounts payable management and staff. We researched best practices in the areas of vendor management and accounts payable. We reviewed access rights within Munis. We reviewed the master vendor file for duplicate vendors and proper maintenance. We reviewed the vendor payment history dating back to January of 2014. We performed detailed testing of a sample of invoices processed over the 12-month period of June 2016 to May 2017. We reviewed all invoices over $500 for that same time period to determine if there were any duplicate payments made. And we reviewed a sample of monthly reconciliations. During the course of our audit work, we identified 2 audit findings and 1 opportunity for improvement. For audit finding 1, we determined that the master vendor file had duplicate vendors, vendors with identical addresses, vendors with no activity during the last 3 years, and vendor names that were not in agreement with department policy. We also noted that the master vendor file had not been reviewed thoroughly for inactive vendors or erroneous data since the implementation of Munis in 2014, which is a violation of department policy and that is recommended as a best practice. Therefore, we recommended that management ensure the accounts payable policy is consistently followed by staff to alleviate this finding. Management agreed, and they will complete a cleanup of the master vendor file in December and will continue to perform this process in December of each year going forward. For audit finding 2, we reviewed the access rights within Munis and determined that there were 9 finance department employees with access to create a new vendor, enter invoices, and print checks, and 15 finance department employees with access to enter invoices and print checks. Even though there are mitigating controls, such as the approval process, unnecessary access to these activities in Munis creates an opportunity for fraud or misappropriation of assets. Therefore, we recommended that management ensure proper segregation of duties exists by requesting that those with unnecessary access to the various accounts payable activities in Munis are deactivated. Management agreed that it would be preferable to have fewer users with access to multiple roles. However, to keep operations efficient, they will instead add an additional control, which will include a monthly review of all finance employee role changes. Lastly, we identified an opportunity for improvement to the accounts payable process, which includes the establishment and implementation of a standardized invoice coding process for all invoices entered for payment. To conclude, we determined that there were adequate controls in place over the accounts payable process. We noticed that with the implementation of Munis in 2014, additional controls were put in place since the prior audit in 2008. We were able to verify that invoices are processed accurately and reconciliations are material accurate and completed monthly. We also did not identify any duplicate payments or unusual activity, and we do not have reason to believe fraud exists. The recommendations we made will reduce risk and provide additional assurances over the accounts payable process. And we again thank Tob Huber, the Assistant Finance Director, and Janelle Zer, the Finance Director, and their staff for their support and assistance that they provided during the audit. So any questions?
Okay, questions for Ashley? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Ashley.
Thanks.
We appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Next agenda item is the SMG Management, Washington Pavilion Management, and Spectra Management Agreements presentation. And this presentation will be led by Director of Finance, Mr. Tracy Turback.
Good afternoon, Tracy Turback. I am very excited to be here today to present these three management agreements for our entertainment venues. We do have representatives from all three management companies, SMG, Spectra, and the Washington Pavilion Management. All three of these agreements are expiring from 5-year terms. And for the most part, there are very few substantive changes in these agreements. And so as we go through the presentation today, we'll focus on what's changing and some of the key highlights. One of the reasons there are few changes to these agreements is that we did 5 years ago when these agreements were worked out, spent a lot of time on contract language and really updating the language in these agreements, and really felt like we started this time around with some really solid contract language, so it really made the process a lot smoother this time. I will say that overall we are very, very satisfied with the services being provided to the city under all three of these agreements. So the city has a very high satisfaction level in all three cases. Again, reps from all three organizations are here today, and each will have an opportunity to address the council and cover some of the highlights in their relevant area. What I plan to do today is to address each agreement separately, and then once we finish one, we'll pause for Q&A on that particular agreement before we move on to the next. I think it might keep us a little more on task that way. With that, we're going to start off with the SMG agreement, and I'll have our GM at the Denny Sanford Premier Center, Terry Torkelson, step to the podium, and he's got a few slides he'll go through, and we'll jump back in and review the agreement from there. So please welcome Terry Torkelson.
Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Terry Torkelson, General Manager, Denny Sanford Premier Center, the Convention Center, the Old Arena, and the Orpheum Theater. There we go. First off, we'd like to thank you for allowing us to run your facility. We have some phenomenal partners, being a lot of the city staff, as well as Spectra Food Services. It's kind of been a seamless process, so we've really enjoyed the last 5 years. And as part of that, we'd like to look back at some of the things that we said we would do with the last contract. And one of those was leverage our different divisions, being the Convention Center, Live Entertainment, and the Theater Division. When we took over, the Event Center was just beginning as a process. So really our major transition was that of the Convention Center. And one of the things that our company brought to bear is we are the largest management company when it comes to convention centers in the world. Side note, we just are in the process of developing a 4.8 million square foot facility in China. So rather large facility compared to ours. But one of the things that really sets us apart is the size of what we do. So when we do national advertising, we get discounts, so we are allowed to be a part of those, whether it be on a broad scale, advertising together as a company, or advertising as individuals. That advertising as a company is one of those things that is very helpful to us, because a lot of those meeting planners out there that we are a preferred vendor to know they can go directly to corporate, and corporate can help them find us. We don't necessarily have to go and find them. We also do national trade shows together. There's a large SMG booth at a lot of them, and once again, the meeting planners know that there's a centralized location they can go to, which has helped with the success of the facility. We have a program called Site Pass, which is unique to our company. When one convention center or meeting space has the opportunity to work with a meeting planner, if they can't fulfill the meeting planner's needs, they pass it on to other SMG facilities. So we work together to pass things back and forth. Our live entertainment division, John Bolton and Jim McHugh and John Bolton are two key industry figures that work for our live entertainment division. I worked with Jim McHugh prior to Chris Semmenow coming on board. We went around to agents and promoters in Nashville and Los Angeles and explained what was going to happen. And when Chris came on board, he took over and ran with it, and I think we can all agree that we've had a phenomenal success with that. One of the things that they've done recently in the building was they actually were the promoters for the Kids Bop show. So not only do they help us with bookings, they actually do things in the facility. Our operational expertise is also second to none. Michael Godoy, who works on our staff, worked closely with Kendra Simmonsma, Shannon Verhey, Sid Combs-Detlef, and Coke Hazard in developing the design. We actually reviewed the preliminary design, and Michael made a rather large list of items that he suggested be changed. About 54 of them were accepted by St. Combs-Detlef, the largest one being a reconfiguration of our locker rooms to make them a lot more user-friendly. And if you're a hockey fan and you've seen the hockey locker rooms, you know that it's a well laid out facility. Michael also put together the preliminary furniture, fixtures, and equipment schedule. He's opened buildings all over the world, so he kind of has an expertise in that area, and worked with Scott Rust. Can't forget him, because he put in a lot of effort and time into that facility as well. Another area of expertise on our operations side is we have a software package called Altum. With a facility like the Premier Center and even the other existing facilities, preventative maintenance is extremely important. You put all the data into this program, and on a daily basis, it spits out work orders so our maintenance people know what to do. We can do short notice ones, but it's that long-term maintenance that really will help that facility last into the future. And then ticketing is always kind of an area that people question when it comes to facility management. In our case, we're working with Ticketmaster. Our company works with many different ticketing solutions, but in our market, Ticketmaster has been here for quite a while. It is a good fit for us. They know the market. They do have some of the leading technologies that are out there. They are the largest one in the world, so for a show like Garth Brooks, where you're putting that many shows on sale, you have that many people on the phones, that many people in queue. Chris and I were on the phone with the promoter during that, and there were at one point 22,000 people in queue online and 1,700 on the phones. So there aren't many solutions out there that can really meet those goals. They also have a phenomenal one-to-one marketing campaign that we use. It's through an opt-in email service, so that people can say what shows they want to get information on or what type of events, and we can market directly to those individuals, and that's a unique feature to Ticketmaster. And the technology they also bring to play, you're going to see a fundamental shift in how ticketing is done over the next few years. Some people think it's going to be a shorter time frame, but You're going to see people go away from having that paper ticket in your hand, and it's going to be your phone or your device. And Ticketmaster is leading the charge on that. When we did Garth Brooks, another Garth example, they brought 4 or 5 people into the building. We had the paperless tickets for a lot of the seats, the good seats, and they were there to make sure that it was a seamless process and we had no problems. Another thing, professional development, very important part of what we do. The SMG has a system in place called Connect Training, where it covers customer service, sales, event management. We've sent our staffs to the customer service training, as well as brought in an expert to come and train our part-time staff in customer service. And then we've sent our sales team and our event managers out. The importance of that is they get to network with other buildings. They get to meet other people who have similar situations to theirs, learn from them, but also make that connection. So if you have something that arises that's unique, you know someone you can talk to, and if they don't know the answer, maybe someone else they know will. And then we send a lot of people to different training sessions industry-wide, International Association of Venue Managers. Chris and I recently were at a conference called AIBA. Obviously we've had some great success, and we're very excited about what's going to happen in the future. The entertainment that's been out there, I think we can all agree, has been pretty much second to none. There are a few of those things that we're still working on, but Chris and our team works very hard to bring those in. The event diversity, people might be surprised at how diverse the events we do are. In the Premier Center alone, that's the only one I'll touch on. You know, a lot of the people talk about the country shows we do. If you put pop and rock concerts in with Christian, it's about 40% of what we do. Country's about 32, comedy about 12, and then the other events are about 16. So the diversity out there really is about as good as you can expect. And the same goes for the Convention Center and the Orpheum as well. You see a very diverse amount of entertainment. Bringing new events to town, with the help of Councilor Erickson, we were able to bring in UFC. It was a pretty exciting event for Sioux Falls, live televised. First time they were in the market, had a great experience. Hopefully we'll be able to have them back. Professional bull riders, another unique event. Great partners with Premier Bank as the title sponsor to that. We are the only venue and city in the country to ever have PBR add an additional date once they've already set their first 2 dates. So the community really has embraced it. NCAA events, the next exciting one Chris once again was really the leader on, is the NCAA Men's Division I Regional Hockey Tournament that, oddly enough, we're partnering with North Dakota. So I think it says a lot to Chris's connection to be able to drag that thing out of the state of North Dakota into South Dakota. So hopefully we'll see some phenomenal teams in there and really sell well. We are one of the industry-leading facilities. We're a facility that a lot of people point to when Chris and I are out and about. People are always amazed. We just put Alabama on sale and really crushed it out of the gate. I think the people were really surprised. Once when we were at a conference, when we put Def Leppard on sale, the agent came up behind us and was like, holy cow, what the heck is going on in Sioux Falls? You sold more tickets the first day than anybody else in the country. So really excited about what people say about us. 2015, we were nominated for Best New Major Concert Venue. We didn't win, but we lost to the LA Forum. So if you're going to lose to somebody, that's a good one. 2016 and 17, we were nominated for Academy of Country Music Award for medium-sized venue. The first year we lost to the Ascend Amphitheater in Nashville, and they do 80 to 90 concerts a year. So in good company. Polestar magazine has rated us as the 88th busiest touring facility in the world, another thing we're very proud of. And then as part of this new contract, we're really looking forward to the opportunities at Sioux Falls Baseball Stadium. We think we can bring some things to the table to help both with the operational aspects, customer service aspects, and then working with the Canaries to try and bring some more entertainment opportunities to that venue. Then, once again, we have a phenomenal staff. Most recently, at the International Entertainment Buyers Association this year, Chris Semrau was nominated as Executive of the Year. That's an international association that the members are the ones who nominate people, and Chris was one of those of 4 people who made it on that list, so quite impressive. And Lucy Albers last year won the Generation Next Award from Venues Today, and she's one of our marketing people. So once again, thank you for allowing us to run your facilities. And then if you have any questions at the end of Tracy's presentation, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Terry. All right, so I thought it was important to bring Terry here and Chad Stoner from Spectra and of course Darren Smith from the Pavilion to talk a little bit to you about the kind of the successes that we've had over the recent years and kind of what they see for the future. So thank you, Terry, for updating us on your perspective. With that, we'll jump into the kind of the nuts and bolts of why we're here today. Looking at the SMG agreement, there are really 4 key areas I want to cover today that are really addressed in the agreement. The venues, of course, we do have some changes, as you folks know. Talk a little bit about the services to be provided, some of the noteworthy changes in those, as well as the term and the financial provisions within the agreement. So with that, looking at the venues, of course, no change to the 4 primary venues that SMG manages, the Premier Center, Convention Center, the Arena, and the Orpheum Theater. As you folks know, we are adding the Sioux Falls Stadium, folding that into this agreement so that SMG will have responsibilities for management and oversight of that facility. As I've said before, I think we've got some untapped potential for revenue opportunities under the lease agreement with the Canaries. We do have some rights to hold events out there, and it's certainly something we have not been taking advantage of in the past. So I think this is kind of an exciting opportunity to roll the stadium into this agreement as well. Again, the Canaries lease really remains in place. Essentially what will happen, SMG will just simply step into the city's shoes and fulfill the city's responsibilities under that agreement. Turning now to the services, of course, in a nutshell, the services provided by SMG are to manage, operate, maintain, and promote the venues that they're responsible for. And as far as this new agreement, there are really no changes at all in terms of that, other than the addition of the stadium into the mix. A couple noteworthy changes that are made to the language of the contract. SMG has always been involved in the capital programming and support for our facilities. We simply did add some language in the agreement that will essentially provide for heavier participation in the capital planning and support. As Terry mentioned, they have some tools that they can bring to bear on the long-range capital repair and maintenance program schedule and help us forecast major upgrades, capital improvements, and equipment replacement schedules, which is, I think, going to become more and more important as the event center and our other venues continue to age. The other noteworthy thing in terms of the services, that if you laid their existing agreement down side by side with the new agreement, you'd notice that there have been a lot of deletions, and those really relate to the pre-opening and grand opening services. There were many provisions in the expiring agreement that related to that. So those are all, of course, no longer relevant and are being removed from the agreement. But other than that, the services aspects of the agreement really remain intact as they have been. Looking at the term, the term for the SMG management agreement would be 5 years, so 2018 through 2022. At the end of that time frame, then, if the city chooses, the city does have the option to extend it for an additional 5 years, but that's purely at the city's discretion. Financial provisions. This is where I want to spend a little bit of time. The compensation structure under the new agreement will be very similar to what it has been. Essentially, there are 2 components to the compensation that SMG receives. There's a base fee plus then incentive fees or performance-based fees that they're eligible to earn under the agreement. Looking a little closer at this, the base fees are essentially that. They're a set amount each year for the 5 years, so they're already predetermined what those base fees will be. 2018, the base fee amount will be $130,000, and the contract provides for that base fee to escalate at 2% each year over the 5-year time frame. The incentive fees, there are 2 components to the incentive fees. One is rather subjective, which is the qualitative portion of the performance-based fee, and the other is very objective and is numbers-driven in terms of how that fee can be earned. When we combine the qualitative and the quantitative incentive fees, they will range anywhere from 0 to 115% of the base fee. So if the base fee is $130,000 in 18, as I said, the maximum incentive fee, if they earn everything they can, the maximum would be an additional $149,500. Again, that's very similar to their current agreement. We did put a little more emphasis on the performance aspects of the incentive fees, and so that's what we will have going forward. Again, looking more into the structure of the incentive fees so you can understand that a little better. The qualitative aspect, as I said, really are more of a subjective nature, driven really by two primary areas. One is customer satisfaction goals, and that's something that is very important to us as the owner of the facility, but I know it's also very important to SMG and to Spectra as well, so that people have a positive experience. And so they're continually surveying customers and attendees at events to gauge customer satisfaction. And so that involves everything from arriving at the facility, parking, their experience while they're there, the food and beverage service and the quality. All of those things go into gauging the customer satisfaction. The second aspect of the qualitative piece is the city satisfaction. We want to have good communications with SMG. We want to see them be effective at managing the third-party agreements. They're responsible to hold Spectra accountable to their agreement, but in addition, there's a whole host of other third-party agreements that SMG is responsible for. Terry mentioned ticketing. Certainly our agreement with Ticketmaster is a key one. We want to stay on good terms with those folks. But it also includes the maintenance and upkeep of the facility. Are they keeping it clean? Does it look nice? Are we seeing some good diversity in the types of events? Are they bringing new types of events to town? So those are more of the qualitative aspects of keeping the city happy under the agreement. The larger portion of the incentive fees are the quantitative pieces, and as I said, those are very numbers driven. It's tied to the growth in event revenues, and the benchmark for that is really looking at what have the past revenues been in addition to the current year's budget, and how are we growing off those numbers. So that's really the fee portion of financial provisions of the agreement. There is one other very important financial provision in the agreement. SMG will be providing a $500,000 capital contribution to the operating account. These dollars will augment the city funding to improve the facilities and to help us drive that growth in revenue and also improve efficiency, so we can not only generate more revenues, but do so in a way that's more efficient on the expense side of things. So that's a capital contribution that will come in very early in the first year of our agreement with them. That'll go into the operating account, and then by mutual agreement, we will determine how those dollars are going to be spent and what the priorities will be. They might include things like some potential advertising or digital advertising improvements. You know, the stadium opens up some opportunities, I think, for generating some additional revenues along those lines. Adding LED lighting in other facilities that we have that will improve the utility efficiency. So those are some of the things that SMG has identified that they might recommend some of those dollars be used. So those are really the highlights of the SMG agreement. Again, we're very satisfied with the job that they're doing. I think we've got a wonderful team out there. The scarcity of changes in the contract, I think, are evidence of that. We've got very few changes And SMG has consistently gotten very high marks from customer service surveys. Again, so we're very, very satisfied with their performance. And with that, I think we'll pause right now. If you've got questions for me relative to the SMG agreement or for the questions for the SMG team as well, we'd certainly take those at this time.
Okay. Councilor Neitzer?
Thank you. As it relates to the Canaries Stadium, as we both know, there's a contract in place with Canaries, and they have certain dates that they can use it, and they control the concessions and all that stuff. Day to day, though, who's going to manage the Canaries Stadium, let's say throughout the year, like cleaning the locker rooms and doing that sort of thing, and just the whole facility of maintenance?
Right. Under the agreement with the Canaries, there are some shared responsibilities. The responsibilities under the agreement that are placed on the city for maintenance, those would be carried out by SMG. So the Canaries would continue to have whatever responsibilities they have with turf maintenance or turf care, locker room cleaning, for example, would continue to be their own responsibilities. I do think, you know, and I know maybe compliance hasn't been necessarily as great from our viewpoint for some of those things that maybe are the Canaries' responsibilities. I see this change in management oversight as a real step in the right direction to help us elevate maybe how that compliance might be and assure that the Canaries are fulfilling their responsibilities.
So day to day, the hands-on sort of oversight might be better with somebody that's right there rather than...
I believe so.
Okay. The other question I have is there's a new door going in from the convention center, one of the rooms straight into the event center. Can somebody talk about what kind of synergies that provides? I hope you know what I'm talking about. You can get from like kind of the back area right into one of the convention center rooms, and I think that provides some
recent passage from the event center into the convention center. Is that,
yes,
okay.
that's what I'm
I think
referring
Terry
to.
can probably address that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was part of a larger project that was done, including the cooler space that was added, that I think Chad would attest that we probably couldn't have done Garth Brooks double dates without that cooler. So what we have is we have a catering room down in the backstage area that butts up against meeting rooms 11 through 14. And as part of this project, we put doors in between the facilities. If you're in the convention center, there's a screen where the window used to be, the shade that comes down, so it actually hides the door so you can't see the doors. We can open those up for NCAA events, you know, where you need a media room, or even if we do a really large show like a Cirque du Soleil where you have a large pool of people you're feeding, we can move some of that into the convention center space. You know, the Summit League's really excited about it because they'll be able to expand their footprint as well. So when they have a media room where they're doing interviews, they can also have a side area where they can access back and forth instead of having to go out through the lobby and go back in. Because there are a lot of events where we do things over there. Meet and greets for concerts. You know, if you want to use that convention center space, once again, they have to go out into a public space where now they can go and access through the back of house.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Starr.
Yes, Director Turbeck, maybe I missed it somewhere. Do we have a copy of the actual contracts? You mentioned during your presentation that if we laid them side by side, we wouldn't see a lot of difference. So maybe I missed it in my pile of stuff.
We have not provided that yet, but we certainly will before it gets on the City Council agenda for approval.
Okay. That's all for me.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Whoever wants to answer the questions is fine by whatever. So my first question is in regards to the Sioux Falls Stadium. I know we've focused a lot of energy on that. Before I go there, first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to SMG and their efforts and the team that they've established here in Sioux Falls, bringing in massive sellouts. Whoever's in charge of those, I applaud you and your team for doing that, because it's been quite exciting in our community and bringing in those folks in from all over the place. It's been fun to watch, so thank you for that. As the Sioux Falls Stadium kind of comes under the SMG umbrella, my question is, one, if there's a specific plan in place or an idea that SMG has of, yeah, we want to have a dirt bike race, or we want to, whatever it is. I have no idea. I know they had that thing last summer. and how that will play in with what the CSL folks come back and say. I think it's really exciting that that is offers on the table, that CSL will look at the baseball stadium and talk about what is the best use for this. I mean, there are a bazillion baseball dates that you cannot obviously jockey with, but at the same time, if there's things that can be held and additional funds can be made, my at first blush, you know, with our South Dakota weather, it's so interesting that it can rain and then be 100 degrees and then it can snow and then it can hail, and you just never know that with the beautiful facility across the street that you can fit 10,000 people in. Why would you host something at the baseball stadium, or what does that look like for you guys? I'm just curious if there's more information.
Yeah, I mean, we're not promising you're going to have 20 concerts a year there. I mean, that's just not feasible. But, you know, the Canaries did host the Nitro Circus there. It was a very successful event. So there are other events out there like that. You could see musical events there. There could be some more family-oriented events. But you're right, they do have a lot of dates tied up. USF plays their games there, and they have other organizations that use that facility. That's why I say we want to partner with them. We want to work with the ownership of the Canaries to bring things in so that everyone's successful. So, yeah, we're not going to tell you you're going to see a ton of events there. Right. It's something that's probably going to start slowly, and we'll try and build on the success and see what works. I mean, you know, it would be some trial and error as well.
So were the Canaries, and maybe this is for for Tracy instead, I don't know to what extent the Canaries were brought into those conversations or not, but I'm excited about the opportunity, but at the same time, you know, as we see a little bit of we see an increase in that, you know, you're also taking on more responsibility. And so sure, you're getting a higher amount, but, you know, taking on a new facility, I didn't know if there was, hey, you have to host this much, or, hey, this is just under your umbrella.
Well, as far as what we're going to, you know, the overall oversight management, you know, that's one of our areas of expertise, is managing facilities. So the Parks Department has done a good job over the years, but there are some things where I think we can come in and find some efficiencies as well.
Right.
So there could be some cost savings with how we do things, as well as making sure the team is doing what they're supposed to do in order to keep that facility in the condition it needs to be in. And then, you know, working to bring in some extra revenue as well.
Okay, one last question if there's no others. My other question would be for Tracy then. When we talk about the base fee and the incentive fees, is this for all of the SMG operated facilities, or is this just for the event center, or is each one viewed as itself for merit? So are we going to look at the Orpheum separate, the arena separate, and then the event center separate, or will that be all lumped into one?
It's one big package from a fee standpoint.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, for a fee standpoint, I understand, but for incentives, are there incentives for the arena? So, hey, if you knock it out of the park and host a phenomenal event at the arena, and you know, what does that look like? Or if it's the Orpheum, are there standards separate for each facility under the one big umbrella?
It's all one amount or one calculation. We'll look at the overall growth in revenues for all facilities, what the total combined revenue growth is, and that's what will drive the incentive fees.
Okay.
So if they can grow revenues at the Orpheum, they've got the same incentive to do that as they do for the arena or the convention center.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll have some more questions as we move forward and get a chance to look at the contracts.
Okay.
Councilor Rolfing.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the situation that we've been seeing in the paper about the possible raising of the arena and that kind of thing. I want to make sure that has been, and I haven't seen the contract obviously, whether or not that's been taken into consideration. That could happen easily if it does happen in this contract. And what kind of, are there any clauses in there that would change the contract drastically if the arena was knocked down?
Yeah, we did contemplate that possibility within that's one of the minor changes in the language that was made, that the city does have the right to withdraw the arena or the Orpheum Theater from their management responsibilities before the 5 years are up, if that's deemed to be in the city's best interest.
And then one last one, if I could, just so that everybody knows, you know, we look at this $130,000 and then getting a bonus of another $145,000. That's not all that's running SMG out there, because as I remember the old contract, they take on, if someone comes in with $1 million, they say they want $1 million guarantee, they're the ones that take on that responsibility. It's not the city of Sioux Falls, if I'm not mistaken. From that, they get to sell concessions, which we get a part on, and the ticket sales, which we get a little part on also, and other little things like that. So they're making their money, if you will, off of those type of things. And the management fee on a multi-million dollar account is fairly insignificant.
Actually, that's not really the case. The fees that SMG earn that I reviewed, that is what they earn. So whether the facilities make money or lose money, while their incentive may go up or down, they're not exposed to that risk of loss of the facility. The city is. So that's why when we've had the last several years and the financial success that we've had, that's been a direct benefit to the bottom line of the city, and really gives us the flexibility to continue to invest in our facilities.
So in other words, if they book something and it bombs, and that happens 3 or 4 times a year, and they end up on a negative situation, we would make that up?
Well, right. The city is at risk on these events. I mean, that's the operating account that runs these facilities, right? All the expenses of running the facility are ultimately the city's responsibility.
Okay.
And the charge to SMG, in essence, is to run the facilities as efficiently as they can, and also generate as much revenue as they can to make sure that that scenario does not happen.
Okay.
Of course, if they have that many bombs in a short period of time, you know, they're probably not going to be in business very long, and that's certainly not the case or the experience that we've had. But
right. They've done a phenomenal job, and I just
tremendous success. Yeah.
think it was important to bring that out. Thank you.
Councilor Neitzer.
Just to follow on, does the cost for, I don't know how this all works, for booking the acts and things, does that come out of our account? That bucket of money? Are they accessing that account?
Well, the fees, and Terry can, I'm sure, augment my answer, but the performance fees really are paid out of the ticket sales. So the dollars that come in from ticket sales essentially go into a trust account until their performance takes place. And then SMG and the agents and promoters will do a settle up and settle up with the performers.
Is it true here that we're not in the business of doing guaranteed takes, as it were, where we say, you know, you as an act will guarantee that you'll make $1 million, and if we only sell 500,000 in tickets, we'll write you a check for the other 500?
I'll let Terry answer that, but I believe the answer is there are times when the guarantees are made. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. But
yeah.
With the larger shows we do, we work with promoters generally. So you have like a Live Nation or a Messina Group or AEG, someone like that who comes in, and the promoter is the one who takes the majority of the risk. There are instances where we will take risk. We have a fund set off to the side from our last contract where we contributed $275,000. So if we think it might be a risky event, I'll talk to Tracy and say, Tracy, you know, we're looking at doing this event. It's going to be one of those borderline ones about making money. Can we use some of that money to backstop it? We've only had to do that once. So, yeah, there are guarantees, but that deal is made. The promoter is the one who makes the deal with the show. In some cases, Live Nation will buy an entire tour. So they are the ones who are, you know, the guarantor of that service. But there are some times where we will take some downside risk as well.
But in that case, you ask for approval from the city in advance?
Correct. We don't take, you know, any major risks without getting Tracy's approval.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Staley.
Tracy, first I've got a question for you. This is just I've got just some clarification questions for my own education. You said it on the contract that there was an option to extend for another 5 years. Is that just You do that with all contracts?
No, it would
Because you're giving them the 5 years, and then you have the option to extend.
the city has the option to extend.
Right, so is that just something you do with all contracts? You always have that option to extend?
Well, I wouldn't say that it applies to all contracts. I think everyone is done on a case-by-case basis.
So why would we have that on this one versus, I mean?
Well, it's certainly a benefit to the city to have the ability to extend that contract. If things continue to go very well, we can extend the existing contract without having to renegotiate a new one.
Oh, so that means at the end of so we approve this 5-year contract, and then we wouldn't be doing any kind of a review then? You're saying, is that what it means?
The city would have a decision to make in 5 years. Do we want to renegotiate a new contract? Do we want to go out to the market and request proposals? Or do we simply want to extend the existing agreement?
So like with
Paramedics
Paramedics Plus, did we have that option to extend with their contract as well?
I can't answer that.
So, yeah, I guess I would like some clarification. Maybe you could get that to me later. Just so I know, well, apples to apples, why are we saying with some companies we're giving you the option to extend, whereas other companies we're leaving that, kind of closing that door and setting it up for the RFP process to happen? I'm just trying to get a sense of how do we deal with everybody here coming together.
I'm not sure you're understanding it yet. We're not giving them the option to extend it. They're giving us the option to extend. This is at the city's discretion. The city can choose to extend it after 5 years, or we can choose not to.
Right. Okay. Anyway, thank you. So then my next question was for Terry. Come on up, Terry. And again, just some educational background. When you came on board, it was through an RFP process, correct?
Correct. We were already managing the arena at the time.
Okay. And then would you classify yourself as a for-profit enterprise?
SMG?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then we were talking about over-the-top sellout proceeds on ticket sales, and I know I'm visiting with citizens, and I think there's a little bit of confusion in the public as to what percentage of ticket sales are actually coming back to support the bond payment, the debt payment for the event center. And I'm thinking in my mind that those two don't mesh. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally the ticket sales is that goes to cover the guarantee for the act. So the promoter, the one bringing it in, we keep the money to start with so we can make sure that when it comes time to settle up, we have all the money in our pockets. But in the end, that money is, after expenses, what gets turned over to pay the act and the promoter profit.
Right, so that it doesn't really go into paying down the debt. Now, the other thing that people need to know is that when we do have this huge ticket sale, this fabulous Garth Brooks concert thing happening, what percentage of that, what he's selling for tickets, what percentage of that actually stays in Sioux Falls? And what percentage leaves town with the performer? Just approximate.
Well,
figure.
on a show like that, obviously Garth commands a rather high fee. So yeah, you'll see a lot of that. The ticket money belongs to the artist. But we also make money off food and beverage. We make money off rental on the facility and different things that they utilize within the facility. So that's really where most of the money is made.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Rippenbach.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. Tracy, can you talk to me about that contract extension after 5 years? You get to the 5-year mark, and I'm not going to be sitting up here, and I'm going to trust that there's someone here that can think that process through. You said that that the city has the discretion to extend that contract after 5 years. It's not SMG saying we're going to stay for 5 years. It's the city saying yes or no to SMG. So can you tell me who is the city, and then who would approve or disapprove that 5-year extension?
It would come to the city council.
The city council, the people that are sitting at this whether, and it's not going to be me, it's going to be some other folks, right? They're going to vote on that, correct?
That's correct.
Then my other question is about that issue of, well, how much of that money stays here? Yeah, Garth, we can pick on him all we want. He's a bajillionaire and he takes home a lot of money. But can you talk about what kind of rate am I paying when I buy that ticket to the concert, and what kind of rate do I pay when I buy the adult beverage that I'm drinking during that concert? What kind of tax rate is that, and who gets the taxes that come off of the sales of those products?
The city sales tax on the sale of, for example, a ticket would be 3%. So for every dollar that an attendee pays for their ticket, the city gets 3 cents. So and when you talk about, I mean, we keep using Garth as an example, but the sales tax revenues to come to the city, just from the ticket sales alone, are well over 6 figures. So, I mean, it's significant. Terry mentioned the food and beverage sales, or you did. So the attendees, if they're buying a beer, a hot dog, whatever it is, the city gets sales tax revenue on that at the rate of 3% as well. So we got our first penny general sales tax, we got our second penny capital improvement sales tax, and our third penny entertainment tax. So all 3 of those are subject or applied to any costs associated with this entertainment venue, whether it's food and beverage or ticket sales. So, I mean, the other aspect of it is, and Terry mentioned this too, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when Spectra gets up here, that the more people we have in the building buying food and beverage certainly benefits the city, because the city gets a percentage of those sales. Mm-hmm. And that far outweighs generally what the sales tax revenues might be.
Right, thank you.
Okay, well, I guess the food and beverage discussion leads us into our next segment.
All right, the tasty part of the program here. Again, we're very pleased with the services that are provided by Spectra. We've been talking a lot about the success, and a lot of that has to do with over the past 5 years the work that Ovations or Spectra have provided for the city. So with that, I'll introduce Chad Stoner. Chad's the general manager, as you folks know, for Spectra here, and we'll let him take over the next few slides and walk you through some of their successes and what they see for the future. Thank you.
Welcome, Chad.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Council. You have to tell me which button's the clicker. Right arrow. Okay, thanks. As Tracy said, I am Chad Stoner, the General Manager for Spectra Food Services and Hospitality. I have worked for Spectra since 2007. Our partnership with the city has really allowed us over the past 5 years to bring fresh and fun innovation to the food service program or operation of the event facilities complex. In addition, we've used our platform at the event center to reach out to our community's needs and create really great experiences with record-breaking events. Using locally sourced ingredients, our award-winning chefs really work hard to impress our clients and their guests, along with meeting their demanding budgets. As we lead the way in food trends, we've earned awards such as Appetizer of the Year and People's Choice for Best Dish in numerous chef competitions. As I mentioned, we've been able to use our platform to reach out and fill needs within our community. We've actually done this by recruiting non-for-profit groups into our Food for Funds program at the event facilities complex. This program allows nonprofits to come in and volunteer their time for a percentage of sales during event as they serve our customers. It does help them meet their fundraising goals for the year. Last year alone, we paid out over $90,000 to these groups, and we actually expect that to be over 100 this year. So it is a great program. Other items that we get to do is with the massive amount of food that is produced on this complex, there is a lot of leftover food, And what we do with that food a lot of times is we donate it to organizations such as the St. Francis House, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and Bread Break. It equals to thousands of pounds of food each year, and we've actually earned an award for our contributions called the Instrument of Courage Award for that. Our partnership with SMG has been great. We work together to turn events into memorable experiences. We've set company records for Spectra for a venue our size. Country artist Eric Church allowed us to earn a $26 per cap, which was nearly $300,000 in food and beverage revenue for a single concert. So we're very proud of that, and it's very impressive of what this facility can do. Our latest and greatest achievement was this past September with the Garth Brooks concerts, where we generated $1.6 million of gross food and beverage revenue, which was an outstanding feat with those 9 sold-out shows. And a big thank you to Chris Semrau for making that happen. So, thank you again, Council, for hearing me today, and I will pass the baton to Tracy so he can go through the rest of the food and beverage portion of this presentation.
All right, so with the Spectra agreement, really the same key areas that I covered under the SMG agreement. This agreement does have a very different structure, so there are a lot of different terms in here. And as I mentioned earlier, Spectra, although the city contracts with Spectra, they are accountable to the city, in addition also accountable to SMG as the facility manager. So it's an interesting relationship, and it's been working incredibly well, the partnerships that we've developed with these two companies. So again, the venues, no surprises here. We're adding the stadium, so for those events that SMG is able to book for the stadium, in those cases, Spectra would be providing the concession services, the food and beverage services, and the city would get a percentage of those sales. This does not entitle the city to any share of any sales for Canaries games. That's strictly managed under the Canaries agreement, and the city's not entitled to anything there. So looking at the services, again, really the same services that Spectra is providing under their current agreement will continue under the new one. A couple noteworthy items that I would mention. Spectra has agreed to put on a full-time catering sales manager. That was something that they proposed. They felt like there's some additional opportunity working in collaboration with SMG to boost sales in that area. I think particularly in what they refer to as social sales, I believe is the term that's used, wedding receptions, that type of thing. And so these two companies work very closely together. This would simply add more horsepower to the mix in catering sales. Again, just like we did with the SMG agreement, we had very solid contract language going in, so we didn't find a lot that needed to be changed. We did remove the pre-opening and grand opening services that are really no longer relevant. This too will be a 5-year term for 2018 through 2022. And the financial provisions, this is where there's when I say it's a different structure, it's very, very different because we don't pay we don't pay Spectra anything for their services. They essentially pay us. Under the structure of this agreement, Spectra is entitled to collect all the revenue from all the sales, and then they pay all the expenses for the food and beverage services. The city simply gets a percentage of that gross sales. So that's how we generate revenues from food and beverage sales. The contract provides, and again, this is very, very similar to their existing agreement. The commission rate paid on the differing sales vary by venue and the type of sale. Whether it's a purchase made at a concession stand is different than a purchase made in the suites or perhaps in catering for the convention center. So the contract lays all that out in a commission schedule. And you can see the range of percentages for sales, range on the low end for suite, in-seat, loge, and club sales, 10% of that, and then once gross sales hit a certain amount, it triggers a higher percentage. But really the bulk of the sales occur in the concessions and cash bars, which you can see ranges up to 50%. So I think about that every time I buy a beer out there, that $3.50 or $4 of my money is coming back to the city. So I feel a little bit better about having an extra beer sometimes. So that really covers kind of the key financial provisions. It's driven by sales. The city really gets a cut of the gross. There is another important financial provision. Here again, Spectra is contributing $350,000 in capital on the front end of this agreement that will go toward equipment. Again, this will augment city funds to help grow sales. And so you can see kind of a common theme here that we're all interested in growing sales, whether it's food and beverage or ticket sales or whatever the case might be to get people in the building. So these dollars will be earmarked for improvements at the convention center, the Premier Center, and the stadium. So we'll see some improvements made to the equipment. The stadium POS system, I believe, is one thing that's slated to be upgraded. And then some additions or replacements of concession equipment in the Premier Center. So with that, again, we're very, very satisfied at this point with the services that we've been receiving from Spectra. You know, we've just got a great team there as well. They're very effective at communicating with the city and keeping us informed on what's going on. And they too get very high marks from customer surveys. SMG, as I mentioned, surveys all aspects of it. One of those aspects is food and beverage. Spectra consistently gets very, very good marks. So we're very satisfied and certainly hope you'll renew their agreement for 5 years. But at this point, we'll pause for any questions you might have on the food and beverage services agreement with Spectra.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you. Well, first of all, most people know I'm a Stampede season ticket holder, have been forever, and I go to a lot of concerts. The food has gets better and better every year. It really does. So we take a cut of the gross sales, not the net?
That's correct.
These percentages are on the gross, okay. And then of the remaining amount, is that, so we take our cut no matter what, and then for the other parts, is that negotiated per act? Like, I mean, can somebody come in and say, I want 80% of the popcorn sales? Or is that just, I don't know where the rest of the food money goes. So, or I want most of the beer sales or something. Is that part of the contract? You know, I mean, if... So.
There is one organization that keeps the popcorn, and that's called Feld. They're the Disney and the circus and that group. That's part of the contract. It's actually negotiated in that they can do that. Yeah. When it comes to sharing of revenues, that can be on an event-by-event basis. So there are some where you share some, and there are some where you don't. So
it's just part of the negotiation of each act? It's part of the negotiation with the acts. No one comes in and says, I want, this much of your beer or whatever. There's a little more complicated than that. Okay. Okay. And then the other thing I had was, sorry, let's see if I can find it. Well, while I'm looking for that, I'm going to give you 2 words, and that is mini donuts. Take that into consideration. The mini donuts down there in Sioux City are wonderful, and I keep asking every year, mini donuts.
It's funny you would mention that, because that's one of the things that Spectra has proposed with some of that capital dollars that they're bringing to the table, that they would buy a mini donut cart for the
There you
Premier
go.
Center.
There you go. It's one of my favorites when I go down there.
I won't say this often, but your wish is our command.
There you go. Thank you. Awesome. Oh, and then has any of the new improvements? Do you still do the? You still bring pizza in? Is that still coming from like Papa John's, or can that be done on site? Or
yeah, so Papa John's has a sponsorship, exclusive sponsorship. So we still use Papa John's. I'm not sure where they're at with their sponsorship on what year, if they've got a couple of years left at this point. So
do they run independent of you? Are they a
Yes, they
freestanding entity, basically?
yes, they are. They are a subcontractor from us.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Yep.
Thanks. And then what was the thing? Was that a churro dog? Is that what that thing is?
Yes, yeah, you've got to get your churro dog on at the Premier Center. So,
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councilor Staley.
Chad? Yes. So a question about, you said Garth Brooks netted, we had 1.6, or gross,
Gross,
1.6 million. Okay.
yes.
So, first of all, we get 3%. Is that including the 3% tax, or is that in addition to that? Is it 3%?
Yeah, all food and beverage sales, you get a 3%.
So we got 3% of 1.6 million into the coffers.
Correct.
Okay, yes?
Right.
Okay, and then the other thing, Chad, I was going to say, what percentage of the 1.6 million did the city get? Because you had those graphs, sometimes we get 10%, sometimes 30%. So how much money did we actually get out of that?
Nearly 50% of that.
50%, so went into, and where did that go? Did it go into the general fund, or where does that third penny, maybe Director Turbeck can clarify that for me?
Yeah, the 3%, first of all, the sales tax, that's something that's collected by the operators. They, just like any other vendor, they remit it to the state because the state gets 4.5% of everything. So that money goes to the State Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue keeps their share and sends us our share on a monthly basis.
Oh,
so that's how that 3%
Oh,
sales
so we
tax
didn't
works.
actually get 3%. We get like,
Sales tax is 3% that the city levies on these sales. So yes, the city gets 3% sales tax revenues off all these sales.
okay, so let's say we get the 3% plus the half of the 1.6 million.
Well, and that goes to the operating account, so that goes essentially to the building, and then that's used by SMG in the overall package. And as he said, every deal is different. Every concert, every show, every tenant has negotiated their own deal. So some of them may get a share of that revenue, and some maybe don't.
Right, but in this case, he's saying half of it stayed with us. That must have been what they negotiated.
Well, I don't think you're understanding the structure of this deal, because Spectra shares their revenues with the city. Mm-hmm. Those dollars go essentially to be managed by SMG, the city's share. That's part of what we pay them for, is to manage those dollars. And they negotiate the deals with the promoters and the acts that come in, the Stampede, they negotiate the deal with that. Everyone is negotiated on a case-by-case basis. Some shows that come in may get to share in the city's share of food and beverage sales, and others may not. It's just negotiated on an event-by-event basis.
Well, okay, but at the end of the day, let's say we take $500,000 in. That money, you're saying, stays with SMG in their account, or does that ever go into does it ever come back into the city's account?
For the most part, the dollars, the positive income that's generated from the event center stays in the city's. It's an operating account that's essentially owned by the city. It's managed by SMG. Those dollars, for the most part, go to help support all of our other venues, the arena, the Orpheum Theater, those that do not operate in the black. The convention center has essentially been about a break even over the last several years, generating about enough revenue to support itself. So the city does have the ability under the agreement to pull dollars out of that operating account. If there's a project we want to use those dollars for, a capital project to, we've been talking about the arena. If there's something that we want to do at the arena, that would certainly be an opportunity for some funding if there are dollars available.
But that third penny money would never flow into the second penny account and then be used to help pay for the debt. The debt on the event center is always going to come out of the second penny, correct?
That's how it's been handled to date. That's been the plan from the very beginning, yes.
So, but I mean, in order to take it from the third penny, whoever is managing that, to put it over to the second penny, how would that look? Would that have to be like an ordinance change, or is that just something on the council we could?
I guess I don't know what that would look like. I'm not sure I really understand what you're saying, Counselor. But maybe we can sit down sometime and talk about it.
Well, and I think the public would like to know that as well at some point. Thank you.
Counselor Rolfing, did you have a question?
No, not anymore.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then we'll progress into phase 3.
All right, the third of 3. Again, we've been very, very happy with the services provided by Washington Pavilion Management, and we're very happy with the direction things are going at the pavilion. And with that, I'll introduce Darren Smith to kind of update you on some of their successes and where they are see themselves heading in the near future. Thank you.
Welcome,
afternoon.
Mr. Smith. Good to see you back.
Thank you. It's great to be back in the venue and get to see all you folks again. Darren Smith, Washington Pavilion. When I left the city to take the position with the pavilion, about exactly a year and a half ago now, I was very optimistic about the future of the pavilion, the potential that the pavilion held. And now I can tell you, again, about exactly a year and a half later, 18 months, I'm incredibly excited about the future of the Washington Pavilion, not only because of what's been going on in recent years at the pavilion, but especially what I've been able to see and participate in directly over the last year and a half. So that's what I'd like to share with you, and also talk a little bit about the future. So here's a few of those highlights over the last, like I said, 12 to 18 months. 2016 was a good year for the pavilion. Very good year. We're coming up on our 20th birthday, by the way, in June of 2019. So we're a couple years away from that, but almost 20 years in business now. 2016 was a very good year. 2017 is even better. In fact, I'd go as far as to say 2017 very likely is going to end up being the best year in the history of the Washington Pavilion in just about any way you can measure. So very excited about that. And all of us on the team there also know we're just getting started. And I'm going to talk about that in one slide or two. So what does that mean? What have we been doing over there the last year or so? Well, we broke the all-time record for the number of season subscribers. So that's the pavilion-sponsored Broadway series we have every year. Broke the record for number of subscribers in the history of the pavilion. Broke the all-time record for number of tickets sold in a calendar year with all the shows we do, rentals, co-promotions, the pavilion-sponsored events. Broke the record for number of tickets sold to a single show, so that was Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon was at the pavilion last May. It is now the #1 selling show in the history of the pavilion. Very successful. I think almost 12,000 tickets sold to 7 shows. Membership to the pavilion is up 16% over 2015. That's the highest number of memberships that we've had in 4 going on 5 years. And I think that number is only going to continue to go up with some of the reinvestments that we're going to be making. The Visual Arts Center experienced a 22% increase from 2016 over 2015. That's going to continue to go up, we feel. And lastly, the Science Center, one of the other major areas in the pavilion. Admissions are up this year for the first time in 5 years. So we had 5 consecutive years of declining admission numbers at the Science Center. So that's not something you're excited about. But this year, when we end 2017, is going to be the first year in 5 years that we will have a year-over-year increase. And that's going to get better as well. Now, what's new? What are we going to be working on coming up, and what's the reasoning behind things getting better? First of all, I wanted to start with your facility that we are given the privilege of taking care of and managing on a daily basis. Your facility is our top priority. Always has been, always will be. That's a significant focus. For those of you who are in the building frequently or even less frequently, I hope you've noticed, even over the past year, year and a half, it's been a tremendous focus for us, taking care of the building, making sure it looks like a first-class facility on a daily basis. And there's a lot that goes into that. Believe me, it's a beautiful historic building, and sometimes we joke it's the gift that keeps on giving because it does present some challenges, but it's beautiful. We want to keep it looking that way. We have a new website coming. I'd be the first to admit our website is badly outdated. It needs to improve. I don't know that anyone disagrees with that. We have a new website coming. It's going to be a great website, a phenomenal change compared to what we've had. We're moving into the 21st century with our new website. It's going to launch in about 1 month. The first week in December is when it will go live for the public. So that's been more than a year in the making. We're excited about that. We have a Science Center makeover coming in 2018. Pretty significant makeover on the 3rd floors and 4th floors. We have new sponsors, new themes, it's just going to change the entire look, the entire dynamic of what's going on there. We have a visual arts center makeover coming in 2018 on a lesser scale than the science center, but just as impactful, I think, in a lot of ways for the visual arts center. We want to make the visual arts center more kid-friendly, more family-friendly. We really think that's going to broaden the scope of the audiences that we're able to engage. New patron engagement model in 2018. This is something we're launching in 2018. We're working on right now. When we went out and looked at what makes the most successful science centers and most successful children's museums successful, what we found is it always comes back to this common denominator here: patron engagement. How are those facilities engaging with patrons and customers when they come in the building? You can have great exhibits, you can have a great facility, all these things, but if you come in or you invite people to come in, kids and adults and others, and they just look at things or they touch things or push buttons or whatever, you're not gonna retain their attention. They're not gonna make those repeat visits that you need to be successful. So we're really overhauling our patron engagement model. The staff is pretty excited about that, and that's gonna be a path to greater success in the future as well. Last couple ones here. Private support has never been greater. You know, we generate about exactly $1.5 million in private support annually. Individual contributions, it's everything from literally $10 contributions on up to $10,000 and more, everything in between. Very strong corporate support in this community. I don't think that'll surprise anybody. And then, of course, there are some grant dollars in there too, but $1.5 million in private support. And the partnership with the city has never been stronger. So that's a subjective statement, but I spent 6 years working for the city, and I was a liaison during that entire time to the Washington Pavilion. Spent 6 years on the city council as well several years ago, and I think the city and the Washington Pavilion have always had a good relationship. I don't think it's been better, though. We communicate on a very regular basis, definitely weekly. Some weeks it's daily, and really enjoy working with the finance team and Scott Rust in particular. Okay, last slide. I wanted to touch on the community access for the pavilion because we are a mission-based nonprofit organization, and so community access is very important. We have to generate revenue, keep our expenses in check, pay the bills, but again, at the end of the day, community access is very important to a nonprofit like ours. So here's just a few of the ways people can get in and enjoy the pavilion at no cost or at a pretty significant discounted price. We have free First Friday, so the first Friday of every month year-round is entirely free to the public. Anybody at any age can come in at no cost, and we stay open late on those Friday nights to accommodate that. We have a Title I schools outreach program. We call it Action Arts and Science, the Action Arts and Science program. The Title I schools, as I think you folks know, are those that have the highest percentages of free and reduced meal counts. And there are 21 of those elementary schools in Sioux Falls, and we are in all 21. So thousands of kids that we serve with that. That's a significantly federally funded program, and then we carry the burden for the balance of that. We have more than 200 school groups come through the pavilion on a regular basis, on an annual basis, I should say. Some years it's as many as 300. Over 12,000 kids in 2017. So these are your classic school field trips that come into the pavilion. I can tell you they are coming in at a significantly discounted rate compared to what someone would pay if they showed up at the box office to pay for single admission. But we have a lot of fun with those. We have education scholarships in our community learning center. That's our education program, all those camps, classes, workshops, preschool, lots and lots of things going on with young kids, even some adults. This year we'll provide almost exactly 100 scholarships to income qualifying kids and families, so they won't pay anything to enjoy those programs. Every Tuesday is free in the Visual Arts Center, so every Tuesday year-round for anybody, all day, it's free for them to enjoy the Visual Arts Center. Youth are free every day in the Visual Arts Center, year-round, anyone 17 and under. For the military, current military members and veterans, they are free also in the Visual Arts Center, every day year-round. We have discounts for them throughout the rest of the building. In the Science Center, for example, we have a senior citizen discount every day, facility-wide. And then the last bullet point here, memberships are $60 and $100, and that provides unlimited access. It gets you discounts to shows, Leonardo's Cafe, lots of other things. And if you think about that, I mentioned that here in community access, $60, that's $5 a month, essentially. It's a little over $1 a week. $100 for a family membership is what, $8 a year, something like that, a couple dollars a week. It's very, very affordable, and it provides access to everything that we offer. So I'll let Tracy come back up and finish his part, and then I'll look forward to questions.
Thanks, Darren. Okay, so this one will be really short and sweet. There are very, very few changes to the pavilion agreement. The two key areas I'll touch on will be the term and the financial provisions. So really there are no other changes beyond that to the services that are going to be provided. So very, very similar to where we are today. The term, again, a 5-year agreement, 2018 through 2022. In this case, the option to extend for an additional 5 years by mutual agreement. So if both parties agree, we can extend the agreement for an additional 5 years. The financial provisions are unchanged from the current agreement. As you folks know, the city funding provided to the pavilion is subject to the annual city budget process. So very, very different from what we see with our for-profit partners. In the case of the pavilion, they're really proceeding forward on basically in good faith, understanding that the city council and the mayor will continue to provide the financial support that's going to be needed for them to fulfill their mission on our behalf. With that is really it on the pavilion agreement. Otherwise, no other changes. So what questions do you have on the pavilion?
Okay, I open it up to the council. Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you once again. So for capital improvements on the Washington Pavilion building, who determines which one should be done and when?
It's really a collaborative effort between the city and the staff at the pavilion. So that's essentially how it's done. We collaborate each year on the 5-year capital program, reevaluate what the priorities are for capital investment needs at the pavilion, and then those come before you throughout as part of the budget process.
Okay, and then I think the rest are probably best suited for Darren.
Okay.
So can you talk about of the city portion that we contribute, how much of that covers your entire budget?
Yeah, great question. So if you are looking at a pie chart of our annual budget and the revenue portion of our budget, so this year the city portion, which is $1.67 million of about a $9.5 million budget, that would represent just a shade over 17%. So about 17% of the total budget. The other 83% is all generated by us. That private development piece I talked about, the individual contributions, the corporate support, the grants, is about exactly 16%. So that private part is very similar to the city portion.
Okay, and I appreciate that. That was something that was really revealing to me, and I just kind of wanted to get it out there because, I think there's a sense, and, I probably had it in the past that, maybe the city was carrying or, however you want to put it, carrying the pavilion and so to hear that it's 17% and they're generating 83% of their own revenues and operating income, that's important. And I just wanted to say that I've had a chance to have lunch a few times with Darren, and I go over to the pavilion, and I've been really impressed by the changes in the last few years. There's been a lot of things. There's the new chef down there. I mean, the food's great down there, and I think sales are kind of hitting it out of the park. When you go to the Science Center, I've gone there for many years, and for the first time in many years, it's been refreshed. The colors are bright. It was very kind of dark and dank. A lot of the things have been replaced there, the exhibits, and there's somebody on staff now, I think I understand, that repairs them, because a lot of times they were broken and you'd go and they'd be broken, and that wouldn't do a whole lot towards making you want to renew your membership when you had broken exhibits. And so just overall, as somebody who's been pretty cynical and critical in the past of the pavilion, I've been incredibly impressed of what's been going on in the last couple of years, and I think your arc is really good, and I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
So thank you.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Councilor Rolfe.
Yes, Darren, thank you for your presentation. A one-word question, escalators.
Yeah. Well, I believe they have been removed. They lived in that capital improvement program for many years. In fact, they were in there back when I was on the city council, and that's been a while. But they have been, in recent years, they have been removed.
Do you think they are needed or would add to the pavilion?
I don't think so. And as Tracy mentioned, it is a collaborative process. I think it's a really good process to talk about the needs, and then, there's the needs and the wants. I don't think so. I really don't. And there's a lot of maintenance. I talked to my friends at SMG. Yeah, they're nodding. There's a lot that goes along with the escalators, the good and the bad. And so I don't think so.
Well, I kind of agree with you, but it should be nice to see them on each end, but you're probably right.
Exercise is good too. So
next and final question is, how is the contract with City Hall and Leonardo's working out?
Yeah, it's going well. We're anxious for the winter. The truth is we opened a new food service in City Hall at what would be the worst time to open food service somewhere. We opened when the weather was just getting good, but that's the way the timing worked out. It was an opportunity for us to figure things out and get our feet underneath us. And, the feedback we're getting from City Hall and the employees there has all been positive, almost 100% positive, very largely positive. And we're looking forward to the winter months when a few more folks will stay and eat there, but it's been mutually beneficial.
Super.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councilor Staley.
This for you, Darren. I've got a question about the Kirby name and the Wells Fargo. I think you might be aware that I was. And so I was just wondering how much money they actually put forward to have those naming rights, and then where are we at now and where are we going with that?
Yeah, so the question that was posed was the naming of the Kirby Science Discovery Center and some of those details, and then also the Wells Fargo Cinedome and some of those details. So if you don't mind, I'll answer both at this time. So in looking back, those deals were made back when the facility was being renovated and open. So we're talking late 90s. Kirby Science Discovery Center was named after the Kirby family, who collectively at that time directly donated more than $1 million. Now, they were also, especially someone like Dan Kirby, was responsible for much more than that in terms of leading the fundraising effort at the time. And I know this is lost upon a lot of people. Here's just one of those little history facts, that the Washington Pavilion project back in the 90s, I think, was in the neighborhood of $30 million project. Only a little more than half of those dollars were public bond proceeds. The city borrowing money with the entertainment tax, the new entertainment tax, to fund that project. Almost half of the funding was from private folks and NASA. So the Kirby family gave more than $1 million themselves and helped generate a lot more than that for the project. They continue to be very good supporters as well, have been since the doors opened. So that is a naming that was done in perpetuity. So that is that it will be that name forever unless the family decides it's not something it would like to do. The Wells Fargo Cinedome, somewhat similar, done at the same time. It was $500,000, payable over 3 calendar years, I believe, and also in perpetuity.
So neither one of those entities are currently, they won't be giving any more.
They both continue to support the Washington Pavilion at what I would consider a significant level, and you can see that in our annual report that's made public every year, and it's on our website. They continue to support the pavilion at a high level, but it is not tied to any naming agreement. That was a one-time deal done back in the 90s and in perpetuity. So anything they do now and continue to do is purely voluntary.
Okay, and then I just have a question for you, Darren. Would you classify your management company as a for-profit business enterprise?
No, we are a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit
But it has to do with your, okay.
Yes.
And then back to the $1.67 million that you get from the city for operational costs, then we're also giving, is that what we're taking care of the building with as well?
Yes. So there's two buckets of funding there, if you want to really simplify it. The first is the capital, which we had touched on. Those are funds through the CIP that are provided to do what I would characterize as major building improvements and maintenance. The 1.67 million, and this is also something I don't think a lot of people understand. I'll be honest, I didn't understand this fully when I was on the city council. The 1.67 million, the operating dollars are tied to the building as well. So for example, we have a number of staff that are responsible for taking care of the building. That's about 2/3 of those dollars. The other third would be for utilities, over $400,000 in utilities, electricity, natural gas, water, building security. There is alarm testing, security alarm system testing, fire alarm system testing, pest control, landscaping, groundskeeping, cleaning materials, tools, et cetera, et cetera. That's what those dollars go to. They're really tied to the building, which is a city-owned building, as you folks know.
And lastly, I just wanted to commend you on working to enable all of the citizens and our children in our community to utilize the pavilion, because I think that's so important. And having it free or even low cost occasionally is, we need to do even more of that, I think, with all of our city-owned facilities.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilor Starr.
Thank you. I want to follow up on what Councilor Staley said a little bit about the things that the pavilion has done even in the last 4 or 5 years to include the citizens of Sioux Falls, whether it's the free First Fridays that as a member I make sure I avoid because it has such a great turnout. But adding the Second Saturdays program has been such a great benefit for membership. I think it's one of those things. Again, working with the Title I schools, and then challenging us as a community with the programming that you bring to the Great Hall. I know there were many who said the Book of Mormon would never go over well in Sioux Falls, and I think that you were able to prove them wrong with that. I know during the performance that I attended, there were some very uncomfortable people. There were some people who wanted to laugh, but they didn't know if it was polite to laugh or not. And the performance, like I said, challenges the community. And I know we singled out Garth Brooks as part of the earlier comments that we had with earlier agreements. But the Book of Mormon is one that stands out that's recently. But some of the other programming that you've done and continue to bring first-rate entertainment to our community so people don't have to leave town to get that. And people come to Sioux Falls and spend a weekend or spend an evening or get to enjoy our community. So thank you, and please continue to challenge us as a community, and the arts do that. One of the questions, though, that I did want to talk a little bit about is, can you break down a little bit more of what's successful in the pavilion and what's not? I know when we look at numbers, we look at the overall picture of what the facility does, but you know, obviously the Great Hall probably pays the bills for a lot of other things. But give me just an overview of kind of how we break out each department and and how we do that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So in general terms and very briefly at a high level, the performing arts is a very profitable area, and so that does help fund much of what we're able to do. I would say followed by the Science Center, although somewhat significant gap between where those two are. That's why we're pretty excited about what we've been able to do in the Science Center and the investments that are coming and what I think we'll see happen there. The Visual Arts Center would be after that. The Visual Arts Center some years can support itself and other years it hasn't. The Community Learning Center, which is our education area, is an area that, as you might imagine, is somewhat significantly subsidized internally, so with our own funds. That's also an area, though, that is very appealing to some individual donors. So that's attractive for development purposes. So between what we do in the performing arts area combined with those private development efforts, that's really how we're able to fuel the entirety of what we do. You know, but last thing here too, a lot of folks don't understand how utilized the building is. Last year there were over 1,800 events in the Washington Pavilion. 1,800 events, we were open, I think, 363 days. So do the math on that. There's a lot of activity going on there. This year, we will do the highest number of weddings we've ever done. I think we might get close to 35 weddings. Lots and lots of corporate events. We have meeting rooms, a boardroom that's utilized on a regular basis, all kinds of different event sizes. So lots of activity going on.
Super, thank you. That answers my question. I look forward to getting a copy of the contract between now and next week when we approve, or we look at approving the contract.
Yep.
Any other questions? Well, Darren, thanks for the presentation. It's the pavilion is something that's always been near and dear to my heart because I was one of the last group of faculty that occupied the building.
Washington High School.
And when we moved over, I think, to the new site on the east side in about '92. It is fun to go to performances in the Great Hall and then actually watch the reaction of the performers, especially the individuals that are there for the first time, and the compliments that they generally have on such a fine venue.
Yeah.
So there is an awful lot to offer, and it's great to see that old building is continuing to give back to its community. So glad that you are a part of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Tracy, did you have anything for a wrap-up? Okay, very good. Well, that completes that item on the agenda, which now we are moving to our last item, which is request for proposal process, also known as the RFP process. And Mr. Scott Russ, our purchasing manager for the city of Sioux Falls, is going to make this presentation.
Tom, do you know where it's located on here? You send it to the clerks, is it in the search folder?
Jim's going to save it to the shared drive, and we'll pull it down from there.
Okay.
Hours for the week, I'll have to go home. Can you do a little shuffle? You guys are hell. Well, leave them out in the cold.
Speaking of cold.
How about if Terry gives us a report on what kind of events that he's got planned for us in the next 6 months?
Actually, I would turn that over to Chris.
Ah, Chris. How about some insight, Chris? Yeah, I figured.
Actually, if you're going to the Foo Fighters tomorrow night, he is like the biggest fan, so we're thinking about having to lock him in a room and keep him away from the band.
How about I'm going to go to the bathroom?
Just trying to fill a little time, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Thank you, Counselor.
Tim McGraw on Faith Hill was announced today, coming back as July 8th per email, so that's another big one, too.
Technology, right?
Hey, there we have it. There we go. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to come over here tonight to talk RFPs. RFP 101 it is. This will be more of a 10,000-foot view of the RFP process, a delivery method that we use quite frequently here at the city. So we'll go ahead and get started. There's our agenda for this PowerPoint here, what we'll be talking about this evening. So what is an RFP? It's really pretty simple. It's a request for proposal, which is a competitive procurement process that allows government agencies to consider factors other than price, such as qualifications, experience, innovations, creativity, value-added services, and really the project approach. I equate it to buying on best value. It is a process where you just don't take the low bid for the project. You award points to I would say consultants or people that provide services to get added value back out of them for those products or services that you're trying to contract for. It's really, again, it's a tried and true delivery method that we use on a regular basis. It's not something that was obviously made up overnight. It's been used for multiple years here at the city for mainly our professional services. It really, again, I got to hammer home this. I think when you're contracting services, you really get a solid return on your investment. You know what you're getting in your project team, and you know what kind of technology that you're investing in. Again, I really feel it's a fair, impartial process that we oversee throughout the city. Most of the RFPs that go through the city go through our office. So what is the difference between a bid and an RFP? Again, these are two different delivery methods that we use on a regular basis. And competitive sealed bids are really, really what we do a lot of our work with here at the city. A lot of our contracts are developed through the competitive sealed bid process. It's really fairly simple. It's probably the easiest delivery method that we use, but we end up working with a lot of detailed product specifications. We know what we want. And we develop those product specifications to get competitive bids that we typically award to the low bidder. It's pretty simple. Most of the construction projects here in the city that the Public Works Division uses, those are all low bid, design bid, build type projects. We buy a lot of our supplies, a lot of our equipment through the competitive sealed process. So how is that different than competitive sealed proposals? Well, they're typically they're used mainly for qualification-based type services. So again, we are evaluating both qualitative and quantitative information in these proposals. We use them typically in our CMAR projects that you guys are familiar with in construction of the event center. Professional services is another good example. We use it in software. We recently just used it in that adaptive traffic system project that was out on 41st Street and Minnesota Avenue. It worked out really well there because there were so many different types of competing technologies there that can do that type of work. So we really are the ones that will drive the delivery method that is necessary to really get the end result. So who has the responsibilities when it comes to developing the RFP? As you can see here, the city departments, what we call the owner, really work with us to develop that scope of work. So they'll give us a draft of that scope of work. We'll refine that scope of work. That is really the guts of the RFP. They'll also work with us on the evaluation criteria, the evaluation team, and the vendor list. So what does the purchasing team take on when we issue an RFP? Well, we oversee the whole process. The entire process is overseen by us, meaning that the process starts with us. They come to us first of all and ask us for our help, and we really coach them along the way on what we can and cannot do in the process. We, again, like it says here, we assist in the development, and we really work with them to define that schedule and define those terms and conditions in that document. Guidance. You know, a lot of people say, well, why, how do you guide, what is your guidance? How do you process all of this? Well, South Dakota state law provides us a guide in SDL 518A 6 and 7. It was a statute that was added back in 2010 when they they overhauled the procurement laws for the state of South Dakota, and they added these two statutes in there, and it's really allowed us to use it for more than professional services. It's allowed to be used for supplies and materials and equipment also. A lot of the language that was put in there is based off of model procurement code, which means it wasn't just dreamed up by a legislator or anything like that. They worked very hard with the state procurement office to come up with the language that's there today. So what are the elements of the RFP? Again, an RFP is broken down into a lot of different pieces, and I'm going to try and break that down to help you understand what each of these areas in the RFP really mean. So when you read an RFP, there's a lot of different paragraphs, and the first one starts off with really the project overview. And again, it's language that we put in there, and it ties everything together. It's the purpose for the project. It's like your opening statement of your term paper. You know, you got to grab attention. You know, with the professor to try and get them interested in what you're trying to achieve. Submittal instructions. Again, this is really very basic here. You got to tell them how to do things. If you don't tell them how to do things, it's going to come in many different ways. And again, our job is hard enough without it being coming in any different ways. So we try and make it so it is everything comes in the same order, the same format, the same number of copies, et cetera. So we provide instructions for them on how to submit the proposal, the number of copies, the format, the so forth. So it makes for evaluating the proposal much, much easier. Terms and conditions. This is something that we spend a lot of time on as we develop that. You know, granted, we do use a template, but not every RFP is the same. They're all different. And so there's contractual requirements that are required. There's insurance, there's indemnification. The term is always different. There's conflict of interest language. There's no contact policy, city rights, all those sort of things that need to be brought into this document. And again, you know, if we get into a certain RFP that it's something different that we haven't done, we'll definitely consult with the city attorney's office to make sure that we have the appropriate language in there, because this is these terms and conditions generally come right from this document right into the contract that ends up being the final contract that you guys ultimately end up approving. The scope of work. I call this really the meat and potatoes of the whole RFP. This is the part that you can't afford to get wrong in the RFP, and this is really the instructions that clearly documents the project requirements, the milestones, deliverables, you name it. What we want that consultant to do for the city. The other piece that's really important too is the scorable mandatory, excuse me, let me get to that page here. The scorable mandatory requirements. This is really what we want them to submit to us that we can really use to score the RFP. So really, we have a pretty standard approach that we use a lot of times, but again, it does change from RFP to RFP. They're never the same. Quite a few times the RFP is, I haven't done one that's been the same yet. So they do change quite a bit. But the main things that we are looking at is the understanding and approach of the project, of the scope of work, the ability to complete that project in the timeline that they need to, their references, and their qualifications, experience of the project team, project manager, you name it. We really want to see what that team looks like, who's going to be working for us. Pricing, another area that's always scored, and it's typically weighted anywhere from 15 to 30%. Again, we don't award on the low bid on an RFP. That's why we're taking a look at all of these other qualifications. So we weight that anywhere from 15 to 30% of the score. But we do have a way that we want all these the scoring proposals to come in too. And there's a reason for that, because we want to be able to lay them side by side so we know what we are able to evaluate. Then there's the evaluation. It's basically the criteria and how we evaluate all of our proposals. It's a scoring criteria that's weighted according to importance, and typically it's a 100-point system that we have that we weight those different criteria, and it could be as few as 4 different criteria all the way to 10. I've seen the whole range. It's really, again, it's very dependent. Again, this is a pretty fluid process, so again, we develop the document on what meets the needs of the owner. The evaluation team the evaluation process is really the next step. After we've created the document and the RFPs have come in to the finance office, they will be recorded by us. They will be reviewed for clarity and making sure that they have all of the necessary requirements. And at that point, the evaluation team will end up getting to see those. So the purchasing team, how does that evaluation team come about? So the purchasing team really works with the department head to determine the members for the evaluation team. And that evaluation team typically is a team of 5, all the way up to, I've seen up to 10 members on it. Typically, we like to see it 5 to 7. But it's a wide cross-section of people from across a lot of different departments. I hate to see evaluation teams where they're loaded with someone from their entire department. That typically doesn't happen. We like to see, the city council's helped out with RFPs in the past. So we'll have usually finance, city attorney sometimes, and other department heads who would want to weigh in on those types of projects will also be part of the evaluation. That evaluation team member will also be required to sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA we call it. It's signed by all the evaluators. Why do we do that? Well, again, we don't want them discussing the contents of the proposals. We don't want them to be lobbied. Again, it ensures proprietary information is not shared. A lot of these proposals, I'm going to go back to the one on the RFP that I did last year for the technology for the adaptive traffic system project. That technology was very proprietary. That technology that everybody had, we couldn't let that information be shared because, again, those are their trade secrets on how their system operates. It's much different than how any other ones do. So again, those RFPs, that information, it doesn't get out. So they don't. They still have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. A little bit more on the evaluation process here. Evaluators will review the proposals. Once they receive them, they'll score them independently. We'll then assemble as a group. We'll discuss the pros and cons of each of those proposals. And then we'll obviously talk about the scores. We'll hold interviews with those different firms. A lot of times we like to shortlist down. So let's say we get eight proposals in. Typically, we will score all of them, and there will be a natural break within those scores. And typically what we see is usually 2 or 3 usually rise to the top. And then we'll actually hold the interviews on those, and we'll score those top 3 based on those interviews that they provide us and the questions that we're able to get answers from them when they come in for those interviews. Once the interviews are complete, we'll hold a final meeting. We'll discuss, and we'll discuss all the interviews. We'll final score things, score the proposals, and then we will issue what we call an intent to award. That is the next step to creating a contract. That brings us really into the negotiation stage of the RFP. And upon that step, those are the results that are obviously submitted to council members upon request. The last process is really the award process, and this is the process that can really take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort from a lot of city departments to make sure that we do have successful negotiations. So it all starts with a negotiation plan from usually from the negotiation team, and that team is usually made up of the city department, finance, city attorney. We will discuss what that plan looks like, and we'll meet with the firm. And it always starts with a document, and we'll continue to share that document back and forth. If those negotiations are not successful, the RFPs, my templates always have a provision in place that prevents us from having to start that process all over again. It allows us to move to the next highest ranked firm. Typically, that doesn't happen very often. In the years I've been with the city, I think it's only happened once that we've ever had to go to the next highest ranked firm. So again, knock on wood, we hope it doesn't happen again, but it does happen from time to time, I guess. Contracts really developed by the city attorney. It's approved by you folks on the city council and executed by the mayor. The award proposal then becomes a public record along with their contract, and then the proposals that are not selected are not public record. It really prevents their proprietary information from getting, that is contained within those proposals, from getting released. And I go back to the RFP for the adaptive traffic system. There is a lot of proprietary information in their technology. Software technology is another one. When we buy software, there's a lot of things that they do different they don't want to have shared. So again, that's the reasoning behind that. So with that, in a nutshell, that's a really high-level overview of the RFP process. I know you guys are probably, it's been a long afternoon for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions.
Scott, thank you, and thank you for staying through.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Long agenda prior to that. Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you once again. For the benefit of myself and maybe the public, just to clarify a few things. Somebody who is not selected, a firm that is not selected, are they free to release all or part of their RFP?
They are.
Okay. Can an executive session be held to discuss an RFP?
Well, again, I wish our city attorney was here, but again, I believe if contract negotiations, if it involves contract negotiations, then I would say yes. I do know that answer. So as long as that we have contract negotiations going on, yeah, then we could have that executive session.
Now, if counselors are not on the RFP, though, can they, even in an executive session, can they be made privy to the content of the other?
Again, I'm going to probably have to defer to legal, but again, on that question, Karen will be here tonight. It would be a good question for her potentially.
Okay, and then can you give preference to a local firm in an RFP?
That's a good question. If you have a tie, I'm assuming that you would that would be your tiebreaker. Would be to give that preference that way. But to give preference or to score preference, state law really doesn't allow for that. We have a reciprocal law within the state of South Dakota, meaning that if someone does have that sort of preference, we get the same preference back. So it's a reciprocal preference. Oh. So it's kind of irrelevant in a way. So really the way the law is set up, if that business, let's say, manufactures a widget here in South Dakota, that would give you your preference. So that makes sense.
You can't put in the RFP document, preference will be given, like a scoring, you'll get extra points? You can't do that?
No, I can't give preference to a state of South Dakota company or anything like that. If all things being equal, it could be used as a push.
Okay, and then finally, so what would you say to people who would say, you haven't seen all of the proposals, how can you vote on just the one that you're given? What would your...
it's a good question. Again, we're hired to do this, and have that responsibility to review all those proposals and bring the best proposal forward for approval for you guys. Again, I think we could, maybe talk about some minor highlights of the RFP, but again, we can't give the devil in the details type scenario, but we could say how many proposals we received and why this firm was the best without giving out any proprietary information of the others.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rolfing, and then we'll go to Councilor Staley.
Yeah, just not a concern, but wondering if the contract, if the proposal is given for the team that wins, the company that wins, Seems to me they're giving up proprietary information.
Well, there's a caveat here. I'll explain. I'm going to go back to the adaptive traffic RFP. There was a lot of technology in there and proprietary information contained within their proposal. And when we issued that RFP, we asked them to submit a public copy that had any confidential information redacted from it. So that proposal is a public record and it can be shared. And it is heavily redacted of all the proprietary technology and how their system operates.
That answers my question. So when you give those out, that one out, it does have the proprietary information.
Yeah. Typically, like if we ask for financial information also, they will also ask that is, they'll stamp it confidential and it'll be redacted.
Got it.
You know.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Staley.
Well, and Scott, first of all, you and I had a meeting a few weeks ago. I contacted you because I had concerns about the golf course RFP and also the TIF that we just approved for the Lloyd Company. So I appreciate the time that we spent together along with some of our city staff. Proprietary information, you just said that they will have that redacted on the contract that or the company that is approved. Redacted is the word. I think that is going to be relative moving forward, because I will tell you that I'm going to talk about the golf course RFP. First of all, coming on this new, and I've said this before in this group, but I have had no knowledge of how council members were chosen to be on an RFP. I was told that if you're on good terms with a certain department head, you may be asked to be involved with an RFP concerning their department. I don't think the people elected me to hold hands with the department head in order to be able to be privy to being part of something that's a process that we're doing. I will say that if we're asked to vote on approving something, I think it makes sense that we understand what the comparisons were to that. And so I've said this before, I've said this to my colleagues, I've said it in public. I think we need to be brought into an executive session. I understand we can't say anything about that under the penalty of some type of legal prosecution. But to show us the pros and cons, like you said, you showed the RFP committee for the golf course. They got to see the breakdown of the pros and cons for each proposal. So I can come back and vote with a confidence for myself that this is really what the best choice is for our citizens, because I think we were elected to make those choices. So that's
that was something that you and I talked about a few weeks ago. Yep.
And I wanted to know, is that like in smaller communities, if they use an RFP process, and I was to go and talk to their council members or their aldermen, they're going to tell me that that's all done in secret, and they all don't get to see that as a group either?
Again, I can't speak for other communities and how they do business, but again.
Okay, so that's not like a legal mandate from our state that says that only the RFP people and the one or two council members gets to see this.
Right. Again, I don't know if it's a legal mandate. Again, we try to keep it to that group of people that did evaluate those and sign those NDAs to keep that information and really to prevent them from getting lobbied. That's the reason we don't give those names out.
But after the fact, I mean, I would hope our city strives to be the most transparent community in South Dakota that says we've really vetted things out, and we're, especially the elected group of people, is getting to see the information needed to make the best decision.
Right.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think you brought up a good point right from the get-go. This wasn't a process that was made up by any particular individual, or the city of Sioux Falls didn't just invent this program as something to benefit themselves. How long, maybe you said this at the beginning of your presentation, sorry, I don't have it in front of me. How long has this process or program been in existence, and how long has the city been using it?
Well, the city has actually I've been using it at the city for approximately 13 years. It was introduced to me at that point, and they've been using it for professional services mainly before that. The statute came into effect in 2010, which really allowed us to use it for everything, not just professional services, but for supplies, materials, equipment, those types of things. So again, the law was silent on it before that for those items that didn't need to be publicly bid. But now this is a delivery method you can use for basically anything now.
Right. And again, I've talked about this a little bit, having just gone through this for the first time. I think one of the key parts is that we do have a pretty good percentage of the group that are a part of this that are citizens. And I can tell the one part that I was a part of it, they were kind of the rock stars of it too, so.
Yeah, they do. The citizens do a good job. They provide a different angle than maybe what we were looking at, and sometimes we get our own blinders on and they help us through that. So citizens have been very, very beneficial on the evaluation process.
Needed point of view, right. And then just explain, I know you touched on this at the end of what you just said, but explain to those who may be watching, because it's the question that I get the most and I think we probably hear about the most. So if somebody doesn't get the bid, it's not opened up for everybody to see, like, oh, it's done, go ahead and take a look, and it's done for their protection.
Yeah, it is. Again, it's not like a competitive sealed bid where we open the bids up publicly in front of everybody and we thumb through them and we tell them exactly what their bid number is, but all we're sharing is a number. Here you would have to share a lot of qualitative and quantitative information. Some of these RFPs that we get are a few hundred pages long. It's impossible to read them. Again, really you just, when we have a public opening, when we use the process as, for buying equipment, we say that we receive 4 proposals. But by law, that's all we're required to say at that point.
Right. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Starr?
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Scott. This has been very helpful. I think knowledge is always a good thing as we understand the process. I'm trying to break this into a couple of things for me to understand it a little bit better. And I think, on one side, we have RFPs that we do for some technology that we need. Not simpler things, but professional services. We need to retain an engineering firm. We need to retain a lawyer. We need to, do some of the build a bridge type of things. The other side of it is I see that we're using the RFP process we're almost setting public policy. When Director Cotter was here a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about using the RFP process for the siding evaluation for the event center, the comment was that we basically want to go out into the marketplace and find out what's available. We don't know what we want. We don't know what evaluation process we should determine. We want to see what's available. That's where my concern comes in with the RFP process, because now we're looking at setting policy or making a decision of seeing what's available. And I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to differentiate the two in my mind. How we can allow, because the first note that I took as we're walking through the process, you were talking about the owner group and then what purchasing/finance does. But we didn't talk about the public. We didn't talk about opening it up to the public. We didn't say, what does the council want to see in this RFP? Again, going back to the siding evaluation process, we didn't discuss it as a group of what we wanted to include in the RFP. And to me, the council and the public are probably the biggest ownership group in that RFP process and that evaluation. And I get that that's why we're putting a couple members from the public on that group, or one, I think, and then a couple from the council, and why that 5 is there. Would have liked to see 8 of us be involved in that selection process because we are part of the owner group, but we don't need the entire thing. So I go back to, I believe it was Councilor Neitzert that said, how do you explain to the public that you made the best decision when you didn't have access to all the information? And it's a trust thing. And I get that. I get that there's a time that there's a trust process, but it's still government, and it's still, I guess, trying to determine what the difference is between $1 million and $1 million in cash and when it's in your bank account. But maybe let me do this in the form of a question and take it in a little bit different direction. For the companies that submit an RFP or submit a proposal to the city, what's their recourse if they're not chosen? I know that was one of the things Director Cotter talked about. Because of timing, they still have the opportunity to say, we weren't selected fairly or the process wasn't fair. What would their recourse be?
Yeah, there is a recourse. Again, a lot of it starts with a debrief with me. And I usually diffuse any of those problems right away. So, for example, if there is someone who is upset because they didn't get selected. They come talk to me. We'll have a meeting. We'll discuss it. We'll explain to them where they fell short. And usually it ends right there. It's really an explanation. They want to hear things out. You know, obviously, when they call and say, hey, I want to protest this, and typically we don't have very many protests here, I'm usually able to diffuse most of that. In the 13 years I've worked for the city, and I told this to Councilor Staley, we average less than 1 protest a year, which is pretty good. That means we're doing our job right. We're writing good specifications, we're writing good scopes of work, and our process is fair, and it's consistent. And that's again, I think we need to continue to focus on that as we move forward.
No, it makes sense. Like I said, in more of a statement from my point of view, I'm having a hard time with the RFP process as a way to set policy and what's in the RFP. The golf course is an example of that. That's a direction that we chose as a city to move. When you go back and look at the RFQ process and then the proposal that we got from the consultant, they set out some very clear parameters of there's some choices that need to be made of how we move forward and what we're looking for in a management company.
Right. There are additional steps you can take. You can issue what we call a request for qualifications. And we have done that in the past where we lay out what the qualifications are and somewhat pre-qualify suppliers or management companies per se. And then from there, we issue an RFP based on that list.
But in the golf course situation, we were here and I asked Director Kearney in this same type of format, okay, you got the RFQ, you've got a report from the consultant that's giving us 2 very clear choices of how we should move forward. When are we having that policy discussion? When's the Parks Board going to talk about it? When's the council going to have an opportunity to have a discussion of what we're looking for to set that criteria to pick the best management company? And the answer that I got from him was, well, we'll just have to see what we get in the RFP process.
Again,
that takes the public out of the discussion process. It takes us as a council out of the policy making.
Right. Again, in that process, I'll go back. I don't know if we took them out per se because we asked for both a lease and management proposal, and again, we allowed everything to come in, and we could evaluate what was best for the city. To me, I think that's the best of both worlds when you have options. And you can look at the options, you can look at the financials, and you can see that. You can see the qualifications. So, yeah.
But for me, the best option is for the public and the council to have an opportunity to set that policy, not a 5-member group of people. And when you take the public out of what we're trying to do moving forward and saying, I don't know about everybody else, but I got a lot of emails of people who are very concerned, whether it's Park Board members who felt like they were left out of the process, whether it was members of the public when we made a choice between those 2 options that we had moving forward. Yes, it's impartial and it's good for those 5 people that were part of that selection process and said that's what's best. It's not necessarily good government and transparent government when we make those kind of decisions for the public without getting their input. And we haven't, at least as a council, haven't had a discussion of where we want to move forward. And this isn't on you. You just happen to be here.
Again, I think this is a discussion, with that department head again.
Absolutely. It definitely goes back to a department head, and we'll probably have those discussions, or I plan on having those discussions when we have the opportunity to do it, when the contract's before us. So that's as far as I need to go tonight.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
I just first want to say, I hadn't worked with you a whole lot, but have served on an RFP and an RFQ as well, which I know is not part of this conversation today. And as I've gotten to know you, I know this is a little segue here, but as I've gotten to know you, I really respect your integrity and your seriousness that you take in this process. You understand it better than anyone else. You coming here today is a little unique in the fact that this probably isn't what we usually do, but you're the expert in it. And so I really appreciate you being here.
Well, I'm flattered by you calling me an expert, but I don't call myself an expert. I'm not going to take credit there. But again, The integrity of the program is what makes it work.
Right.
And again, our reputation of having a good procurement department and having that good reputation is paramount in making sure that we get good proposals in here at the city. So I take that very seriously.
And when he's been on these RFP or RFQ that I've been in, Scott plays an impartial role in that, to where he is the gatekeeper of the information that comes in, distributes it, collects the information, lets us know the parameters in which we are to operate based on state law, not based on what he thinks, based on the actual rules. And that standard is followed with consistency. So if we are ever dragged through court, you can say, this is how we did it. Well, is this the way you do it every single time? Yes, it is. There is that consistency. You know, I know we've talked a little bit about the policy aspect, and we're not defining policy. Picking the golf course management is not setting policy. It's saying who should run our golf course, and looking at the process, scoring it, doing it in a way of comparing those proposals. I have not seen any of them, just like the rest of us, other than one member. But having served on an RFP and RFQ, the RFQ is really unique too, because you can say, hey, I'm just doing this based on your qualifications. However, at the end of the day, they bring in pretty pictures, and oftentimes people bring in other properties that they want as well. And so you kind of wade through some of that, making sure that they're fitting that. You know, the RFP with the siding is very unique. It was really done at the request of this council, because this council asked for that to be done. It could have been done in an RFQ. However, at the end of the day, we really needed to make sure we were laser focused in accomplishing that goal, to making sure our investment was just really sound, and that the water barrier was created. So again, not a policy decision, but us just making sure those investments are protected, those assets are. The confidentiality, I would like to use that word versus the secret word. I think the confidentiality of this is protected in state law because of that proprietary information and the danger of that being released. I've been on, like I said, the other RFP that I served on, and those that did not get selected chose to put it in to the media and chose to sit down with the media, which was their choice. It was totally fine.
Absolutely, it's their choice.
But I also respect the fact that they don't want all their financial information out for everyone to see as well. And it does boil down to trust in the process. And it's not done willy-nilly. It's not done with a smoke-filled room. It's not done saying, hey, Christine, you like this one, right? That's not the way it's done. It's done in a very professional, well-thought-out process with consistency from start to finish. So thank you for your effort. I know we're up against the time, so thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. It was great. Thank you.
Councilor Urbanbach.
I just wanted to dovetail just a little bit on what Councilor Erickson was saying, but I want to start with a comment to Scott, and you're kind of standing here representing city staff in general right now. I've been just watching you debate with council members about the legality of state law, and I appreciate your professionalism. I appreciate that you're willing to take us to the level where we really start to understand this. We are, as elected officials, just citizens. We are just those people that are trying to do the best that we can on behalf of those people that elected us. They elected us to help them think through this, and that's what we're trying to do, and I appreciate you leading us through that. The other thing that I want to talk about then is that idea of setting policy, and Councilor Erickson pointed to it very clearly, that this is, we're using that word policy pretty loosey-goosey here when we're starting to talk about how one RFP is going to set some sort of dramatic policy. To me, policy is a lot more than that. But I think it's important for us to remember as an elected council that we are the ones that directed that this is the direction this RFP is going to go, that there is not, I think the significant point here is that there isn't anyone in the city staff. There isn't anyone at this dais. There isn't even Mark Cotter, our number one engineer, right, says, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know what we're looking for. I don't know how to find it. Let's use this process to figure it out. And I think that's the key to this, is that we don't have anybody in Sioux Falls. We don't have anybody that's willing to take this on, and we're going to try to figure it out through an RFP process. And so I think, again, it comes back down to the word that we've been throwing around here. It is trust. It's a matter of following the process that is set down by state law, that this is a legal way of doing this, and it's going to be a really functional way of doing this for us, in particular for this particular project, and it has worked over and over again, been very successful. And so, again, I appreciate, Scott, you being the leader on that. You, Councilor Erickson nailed it on the head. You are that person that, holy cow, buddy, you just really have this figured out, and I don't know how we would do this as elected officials without you helping us think it through, and so I appreciate that.
It's a very difficult process, but again, my staff and myself were trained to do this. We brought NIGP in here, an Institute for Public Procurement, and we went through it. We went through a 200-page book on how this process works. It was a grueling 5 days, but again, I wanted the whole staff to understand it and how important it was. It is a process, it is a delivery method that scares most cities, scares most finance officers in this city. But again, you got to know what you're doing when you use it.
Mm-hmm. And it's good to know that your finance officer is sitting right behind you. He's got your back. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Scott? Well, Scott, thank you very much. And I'd just like to reiterate that this RFP process isn't just something that we as a city incorporate and that we use. This RFP process is used by cities across the state, cities across the country for that matter. It's used by county government, it's used by state government, it's used by federal government. It is used by large businesses, it is used by small businesses, it is used by for-profit businesses, and it is used by businesses such as my own, not-for-profit. And it is a very logical, orderly process to help ensure that you actually get the services that you need as an organization, or in this case as a city, that you're looking for. And I'm not certain that it's establishing policy. It all goes back to a well-defined scope of work. And you had mentioned that during the presentation. That is where all the meat and potatoes is in an RFP, a well-defined scope of work. And with the upcoming RFP regarding our event center siting, that is well-defined. It is not prudent for us to dictate what the process is going to be. That is going to be up to the proposer. If we were the experts on everything, we wouldn't have to go out on RFP, even utilize the RFP process. We would do it ourselves, but we are not. And so we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner, so to speak, by dictating what the process is. We have to let that play through. So it is very important, and I thank you very much for the time that you have taken this afternoon and now this evening to come and present to the council.
No problem.
So Scott, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, council, that is it for the evening, and I think we finished with about maybe 4 minutes to spare here, so thank you very much. We will be back at 7 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.